Hey there, welcome to Sleepy History Secrets, the channel where history gets weird but the voice stays calm. Tonight we're going to travel through time, not in haste, but in hush. You'll visit a world that didn't have comfort, convenience, or even consistent plumbing. A world where waking up was an act of courage and surviving breakfast felt like a small miracle. But our journey doesn't end there. We'll drift from muddy medieval mornings to candlelit palaces where an empress rewrote her destiny, then descend into a crimson tomb beneath a Maya jungle, and finally arrive at a small blue house in Mexico where a woman turned her pain into colour. It's a story about endurance, about what people do when life refuses to make sense. But before you settle in and get cozy, please take a quiet moment to like the video or subscribe, only if you truly enjoy falling asleep to humanity's bad decisions. And when you're ready, leave a comment telling where you're listening from and what time it is right now. It's oddly comforting to know how many of us are awake at the wrong hour, each in our own little corner of history. Now dim the lights, let the air hum softly in your room, and let's wander gently into the year 1325, where the day begins with the sound of a bell and the smell of everything. You open your eyes to the sound of metal against metal, the church bell, blunt and unkind, ringing across a village still half asleep. It is the medieval version of an alarm clock, louder, colder, and much harder to snooze. The first thing you notice isn't light, it's smell. A mix of smoke, damp wool, stale ale, and something untraceable. A scent halfway between family and livestock. You live in a one-room hut, shared with everyone you love and several creatures you didn't choose. The walls sweat when it rains, the roof sighs when it doesn't. The floor is mud packed by centuries of footsteps and spilled soup. You shift beneath your blanket, which weighs as much as a small cow. It's made of wool, thick, scratchy, and alive with quiet movement. Inside it, generations of fleas are thriving, tiny historians documenting your existence bite by bite. The straw mattress beneath you has aged into something between a bed and a compost heap. When you turn, it rustles, not with comfort, but with opinion. There's no such thing as privacy. You sleep beside your family, your animals, and a vague awareness of everyone breathing in the same rhythm. At the far corner, a goat watches you with the calm disinterest of a creature who has already accepted how bad mornings can be. The air is heavy with smoke from last night's fire, which tried and failed to chase away the cold. Outside, the sky is more grey than blue. The sound of the bell keeps tolling, marking not the hour but the authority of heaven. You don't own time. The church does. Your life runs on its schedule and its reminders come in sound, not mercy. Someone stirs, a child coughs, a hen complains, a pot clanks. The day has begun and you're expected to participate. There's no 5 more minutes. There's only get up or go hungry. You reach for your clothes, though clothes might be too generous a term. They are the same ones you wore yesterday and the day before that, and probably the day you were born if your mother's memory of sewing is correct. A wool tunic, stiff from sweat and weather. Your boots, if you have any, are more patched than leather. They sigh when you put them on, as if they've accepted that survival is their only function. Your fingers are rough, cracked from cold and labour, and the air bites through the small gaps in your sleeve. It is morning in medieval Europe, and the most modern thing in your life is the concept of regret. You step outside. The world greets you with mud and chickens. The village smells like breakfast and decay, which, here, are not opposites. Neighbours nod silently. Everyone is too tired to waste words. The sky still feels unfinished, and somewhere in the distance the bell rings again, as if reminding you that even the clouds work for the church. There's a bucket of water waiting, frozen over during the night. You crack the ice, wash your face with something colder than forgiveness, and call it hygiene. Soap is rare and overrated. Most people prefer the protective layer of dirt that God allegedly provided for free. They believe washing opens the pores to disease, which in fairness is sometimes true, especially when the river doubles as both bath and sewer. You chew a piece of bread that has the texture of guilt and the flavour of nothing. It's yesterday's loaf, but that's normal. Bread isn't food, it's a concept. If you can bite through it, you win breakfast. You sip small beer, weak, cloudy, safe. Even children drink it. It's not about pleasure, it's about survival disguised as hydration. The morning is endless. The work will begin soon. Fields to tend, tools to repair, taxes to pay in both coin and silence. But for now you stand in the doorway of your small, smoky world and look at the mud path that connects every life to the same fate. You breathe in the smell of ash and damp straw and think for a moment that if heaven is real, it probably smells better than this. You don't know it yet, but someone centuries in the future will read about your life and call it simpler times. They'll imagine romance in your misery, charm in your poverty, and adventure in your exhaustion. But you, standing barefoot in the mud, know the truth. These are not simpler times. They are simply harder ones. And still, you will work, you will laugh when you can, you will endure because you have no choice. And by nightfall you'll pray the same prayer everyone prays here, that tomorrow's bell rings for you, not for someone else's funeral. The morning grows brighter, though not warmer. You stretch your arms, feeling the stiffness of sleep and survival. The bell is still ringing somewhere far away, as if it's less about devotion and more about noise management. You're awake now, which means it's time to face your least favourite ritual, cleanliness, or what passes for it. Inside your hut there is a bucket. It has seen things. It holds the family's nightly contributions, the kind no one writes songs about. You carry it to the door, careful not to spill redemption on your feet. Outside, the air greets you with the smell of smoke, manure, and optimism dying slowly. You step onto the path, glance around, and shout the traditional warning, Guadilou. This is medieval language for duck if you value your head. Then you toss the contents into the street, where it joins a growing stream of communal honesty. The street is not a road, it's an ecosystem, a slow-moving river of mud, waste, and discarded intentions. Pigs wander through it with an attitude of professional detachment, dogs sniff for opportunity, and children play nearby because technically that's their front yard. The village is small enough that privacy is a myth, and large enough that you can always blame the smell on someone else. You head toward the well to fetch water, passing the public latrine, a plank over a pit that serves both as a convenience and a local hazard. Sometimes it collapses, turning an act of necessity into a rescue operation. The smell reaches you before the sight does, and it lingers longer than most friendships. A few villagers nod as you pass, their faces marked with the same polite endurance that comes from pretending not to notice each other's humanity. Water, at least in theory, should solve this problem, but it doesn't. The nearest river is an overworked employee. It bathes, feeds, and poisons the town all at once. When it rains, the river floods. When it doesn't, the waste sits there, humming softly to itself. You lower the bucket into the well, listening for the distant splash that says salvation is still liquid. You draw it up, heavy and glistening, and take a cautious sip. The taste is metallic, earthy, slightly historic. You decide that boiling it later will fix it. If you have wood, which you don't. In wealthier homes, meaning houses with 2 rooms and fewer goats, people use a garderobe, a vertical hole leading down to a moat. It's the castle version of luxury plumbing. Gravity does the rest. Of course, sometimes the moat freezes, and what was once waste becomes part of the castle's winter decor. Soldiers below complain about the smell, but war has rarely been a fragrant business. If an enemy ever tried to sneak in through the waste chute, it would be both the bravest and the worst decision of his career. Bathing, however, is a more complicated affair. Most people avoid it, not because they dislike being clean, but because they're afraid of what clean might invite. They believe washing removes the body's natural defences, that open pores welcome sickness like open doors welcome beggars. A bath is a medical risk and a moral gamble. Besides, hot water is a luxury, and even if you had it, someone else probably needs it more, like the church or the pigs. In towns there are bathhouses, communal and controversial. Steam rises, laughter follows, and morality quickly becomes negotiable. The church often frowns upon them, seeing too much nakedness as an invitation to sin, so naturally they're quite popular. Inside, people sit in wooden tubs filled with reused water, pretending it's a spiritual experience. It's one of the few places where warmth, gossip, and bacteria mingle freely. You might leave cleaner, or you might leave with new friends, new diseases, and a lighter purse. Back in your village, bathing is rare and eventful. Maybe once a month, if the stars align and the mud is kind. Soap, if it exists at all, is homemade. Animal fat mixed with ashes and good intentions. The smell is unforgettable, and so is the price. You decide it's easier to stay loyal to dirt. Dirt is dependable. It doesn't judge, doesn't leave, and in its own way keeps you warm. Your hair itches, you scratch it, and something tiny scurries in response. You sigh. Everyone has fleas. They're a kind of civic identity. Even nobles scratch. They just do it behind curtains and call it composure. There's a local saying, where there are fleas, there's life. It's not comforting, but it's accurate. A few hours later, the church bell rings again. It's a sound that marks everything: meals, prayers, plagues, weddings. It's less about time and more about hierarchy. The bell tells you when to live. It means morning is nearly done and work must begin. You glance at your bucket, half full of muddy water and the day's potential, and you wonder briefly how people in the future will handle all this. Maybe they'll find a way to make water safe. Maybe they'll invent a word for invisible things that cause disease. But for now, you only know what the bell tells you. Wash when you can, pray when you must, and don't drink from downstream. The sun finally climbs above the thatched roofs, lighting the mist that hangs like breath over the village. Chickens scatter, children laugh, dogs argue, and smoke curls from every chimney in a tired kind of unity. Life moves on, not out of optimism, but habit. And in this small rhythm, carry, pour, wash, endure, civilization manages to continue. You return the bucket to its corner. The air inside your hut is thick again with warmth and faint despair. You glance at your family, each person already busy pretending that the day will be different. It won't be, but hope has never required evidence. You sit by the doorway, letting the light fall on your face. Somewhere beyond the village, beyond the bell, beyond your imagination, the world is already changing. Empires will rise, explorers will wander, science will learn new names for the things you simply call bad air. But for now, you are here, alive, and the only miracle you need is a bucket that doesn't leak. In this part, we stayed close to the ground, where daily life was loud, wet, and unashamed. The humour lingered in the space between disgust and acceptance. The dominant sense was smell again, mixed with the cold sting of water and the dull clang of bells. Every image softened the past into something you could almost touch, almost pity, almost laugh at. And as we drift further into the story, the day will continue toward hunger, hard bread, and the taste of effort disguised as breakfast. The bucket has done its duty, and so have you. The bell's echo fades into a quieter sort of noise, the sound of everyone pretending to enjoy morning. Smoke curls through the air again, and with it comes the thick, hopeful smell of food. Breakfast is ready, which sounds comforting until you remember what that actually means. You step outside. The village is awake now. A dozen huts breathe out smoke together. turning the air into something between fog and stew. It smells faintly of onions, but mostly of resignation. A few chickens strut through puddles that have forgotten how to dry. Someone's dog is already arguing with someone's pig. It's a peaceful kind of chaos, the kind that happens every day, so no one bothers to call it chaos anymore. In your home, breakfast is waiting in a pot over the fire. It has been waiting for several days because it's the same pot, the same fire, and almost the same contents. It's called pottage, a word that means everything and nothing. Grains, vegetables, water, maybe a bone if you're lucky. Each morning you add something new and remove nothing old, so over time your breakfast becomes a living archive of previous meals. It tastes like history and smells like endurance. You take a spoonful and blow on it carefully, not because it's hot, but because you're trying to manage expectations. The first bite is both warm and disappointing. It fills your stomach the way rain fills a hole, completely, but without joy. The bread beside it is a weapon disguised as food. It's hard enough to break a tooth, and sometimes does. You remember that the local baker mixes ground beans, rye, or even sawdust into the dough to make it last longer. You chew carefully, like someone performing minor surgery on their own mouth. Each bite is a small act of bravery. Water technically exists, but drinking it is a gamble, and life already has enough of those. The village stream is clear on top and questionable below, so most people prefer small beer. A weak brew, barely fermented, made safe by boiling. It's cloudy, sour, and entirely respectable to drink at breakfast, because here, sobriety isn't a virtue, it's an accident. Even toddlers drink it. If you can walk and hold a cup, you qualify. Everyone in the village carries a faint permanent buzz, the closest thing they have to public health. A few wealthier families use ale instead. It's stronger but expensive and tends to encourage early afternoon philosophy. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you wonder if life would feel different without this dull warmth in your belly, this mild, liquid optimism that keeps the fear quiet for a few hours. Maybe it would. Maybe that's why no one tries to find out. You take another spoonful of pottage. It's slightly different today, saltier, maybe because of the sweat dripping from your brow as you stir it. If you're lucky, a stray piece of bacon from last week survived to flavour the pot. If not, the memory of bacon will have to do. The food is heavy, but your body understands it. It's not meant for taste, it's meant for labour. It's the kind of meal that prepares you to spend the day doing things you didn't choose. That's the secret of medieval cuisine. It's practical despair with nutritional value. Children eat first, or at least they try. A mother hands out bowls in order of importance, which is always a debate, never a rule. She wipes her hands on her apron, which has been clean only in theory for years. No one complains. Complaining takes energy, and energy is for work. You hear laughter outside, a thin, half-hearted laugh. Two boys are daring each other to chew dried rye crusts without soaking them. It's entertainment, if you can call it that. They take turns grimacing until one cracks a tooth and wins by default. Adults shake their heads, but no one stops them. They're learning the same lesson everyone here learns. Pleasure is temporary, texture is eternal. Sometimes, if fortune smiles and the harvest didn't collapse under rain or rats, you might taste meat. Not much. Maybe a scrap boiled for flavour, not sustenance. Spices exist, but they are treasures from faraway lands. Pepper, cinnamon, cloves, each one worth its weight in fantasy. To most people, spices are rumours. You might live your whole life hearing about the smell of cinnamon the way others dream of paradise. Today's meal is simple, so simple it barely counts. But there's comfort in that too. Predictability is its own form of kindness. You know exactly what you're getting, and you know exactly what it will cost. Another day of work, another night of fatigue. Still, as you eat, you feel a small flicker of gratitude. The food might be bland, but at least it's there. In a world that's always one bad harvest away from disaster, existence itself tastes like victory. A small piece of bread slips from your hand, landing on the floor. The goat eyes it, hesitates, and then decides you weren't using it properly. You let it have the bread. You've stopped arguing with goats. They win every debate. The air inside the hut grows thicker, full of steam, smoke, and the small sounds of survival. The scrape of spoons, the sighs of satisfaction that sound more like surrender. This is breakfast, medieval style, a ritual of chewing, hoping, and pretending not to notice how hungry you still are. Outside, the bell tolls again. Its tone changes slightly, lower, slower, signalling the next part of the day. It's time for work. Your muscles already ache at the thought, but the rhythm is familiar. You finish your bowl, set it aside, and wipe your hands on your tunic. The fabric feels like a rough promise, dependable, unkind, and necessary. Before you step out, you glance at your family again. Faces pale, eyes patient, each one preparing to face a world that demands everything and offers little. You realise that no one here expects happiness. They expect weather, hunger, and exhaustion, and somehow they keep finding reasons to laugh anyway. Maybe that's what faith really is, the quiet decision to smile at breakfast, even when breakfast fights back. You step outside, the air cold and forgiving in its own way. A rooster crows, late but confident. The sky is slowly brightening, the mud reflecting hints of light that almost feel like hope. You breathe deeply and smell wood smoke, boiled grain, and the faint sweetness of nearby hay. For a moment, the world feels still. You are fed, clothed, and alive, which is, statistically speaking, an incredible success. And somewhere inside that quiet success, you sense the first flicker of something older than comfort: endurance. In this gentle chapter of the day, we tasted what survival really means. A bowl of warmth that remembers too much, bread that could double as defence, and beer that hums softly in every belly. The humour came from small absurdities. The dominant sense was taste and texture, and the emotion settled between gratitude and exhaustion. As we drift further into the story, the day will stretch toward work, labour, and the endless negotiation between effort and hope. The meal has ended, though ended feels like an optimistic word for something that never really began. The fire flickers low, sighing in its bed of ash. You pull away from the table, if one can call it that, and glance at your clothes hanging on a wooden peg near the smoke hole. It's time to dress, or more accurately, to remind yourself that warmth and dignity rarely exist in the same outfit. You reach for your tunic. It is made of wool, dyed the colour of old bread, and carries a familiar weight. It was spun, woven, and sewn by someone who loved you enough to wish you slightly less cold. It scratches against your skin, and for a brief, treacherous moment, you consider wearing nothing at all. But then the air touches your bare arms, sharp, wet, and judgmental, and you remember why people stopped evolving tails and started making clothes. Wool is the only fabric that forgives your life choices. It holds in heat, resists the worst of weather, and comes with a side effect known as perpetual itching. You slide it over your head. It smells faintly of smoke, sweat, and something that might be last season's stew. There's a small tear at the elbow you keep promising to mend, but the hole has become an old friend, a kind of portable ventilation system. Next, you reach for your hose, thin wool stockings that have outlived their enthusiasm. You tie them with strips of fabric, each knot reminding you that circulation is overrated. They sag slightly, the way hope does around noon. But they work. They cover skin, trap warmth, and give fleas a consistent address. In this century, fashion isn't about expression, it's about survival. You don't dress to impress, you dress to prevent frostbite. Your shoes, if you're lucky enough to own them, are patched more times than you can count. Leather, when new, can be soft and proud, but these have walked through too many winters to remember pride. The soles flap slightly as you move, not enough to complain, just enough to comment. When the mud is deep, they become one with it. Sometimes you lose them entirely and find them again months later, now serving as temporary homes for smaller, luckier creatures. A belt cinches the whole arrangement together. It's not for fashion, but for pockets that don't exist. Hanging from it, a small knife, a pouch, and the faint hope that you look somewhat put together. You don't. But everyone around you looks the same, and that's what community really means. Shared discomfort, equally distributed. Women's clothing follows the same principle, just with more layers and fewer privileges. Wool skirts heavy enough to bruise the knees, aprons stiff with labour, headdresses that double as advertisements for patience, each layer designed to keep out the cold and keep in the modesty, as if one could freeze elegantly. Children wear whatever fits, or whatever hasn't yet been eaten by mice. Sometimes that means smaller versions of adult clothes, and sometimes that means nothing at all. In summer, children run barefoot through the mud, their laughter sharp against the sound of buzzing flies. In winter, they huddle near the hearth, wrapped in blankets that smell of everything that ever lived there. You take a moment to look around your home. Hanging from the rafters are other clothes, drying, aging, and slowly becoming part of the house. Clothing's expensive. A single tunic can cost weeks of work, so when one tears, it's repaired. When it's too thin, it becomes a patch. When it's too far gone, it's turned into stuffing for a mattress or padding for a wound. Nothing is wasted. Even the lint in your pockets has somewhere to be eventually, usually the fire. Bathing, as you know, is rare, so the scent of your clothes is best described as historical. Smoke does its part to mask it. Every hut smells of smoke, not because people like it, but because it's the only deodorant that doesn't come with guilt. The scent seeps into fabric, hair, and memory so deeply that even ghosts probably smell faintly of firewood. There are rumours of perfumes in noble houses, made from rose oil or amber, and things that sound invented. You've never seen them, but you imagine they must smell like promises, expensive, fleeting, and mostly decorative. Here, your perfume is effort. You smell of labour, and people respect that. They may not say it, but they understand. Everyone here carries the same fragrance, a mixture of dirt, smoke, and survival instinct. For the nobility, things are slightly different, though not necessarily better. Their clothes are heavy with embroidery, silk, and expectation. They change outfits more often, but comfort is still an illusion. A rich man may wear fur-lined sleeves, but he still sweats through them in summer and freezes in them come winter. A lady's gown might shimmer under candlelight, but it takes 2 servants and half an hour just to sit down. Luxury, in this world, means more fabric to suffer in. You finish dressing and tie a small piece of cloth around your neck. Part scarf, part dust filter, part superstition. Outside, the frost has started to melt, releasing the faint, earthy scent of thawed manure. You step out and feel the sun trying its best, a dim coin of light behind the clouds. The ground squelches beneath your boots. Each step makes a sound. That's half complaint, half acceptance. It's the sound of life continuing no matter how much it dislikes itself. You look down at yourself. Wool, leather, dirt, and breath. It's not beautiful, but it's honest. Every stitch is a story. Every stain, a calendar. You wear your life the way a knight wears armour. Not for glory, but to keep the world from getting in too quickly. A neighbour passes by, nodding. Her own tunic the same dull brown as yours, the colour of humility and available dye. She carries a basket of laundry, though laundry here means moving dirt from one surface to another. You nod back, a silent acknowledgement of shared futility. It's a polite way of saying, nice weather for existing. As the sun climbs a little higher, the village begins to shimmer with motion, people walking to the fields, the forge, the well. Every colour in sight belongs to the earth. Brown, grey, faded green. Nothing shiny, nothing new. Even the sky seems to dress down for the occasion. You walk toward the path that leads to the fields, your clothes bending and creaking with each step, reminding you that they're working as hard as you are. Somewhere, a child laughs. Somewhere else, someone coughs. The air tastes faintly of ashen morning. You take another breath, pull your cloak tighter, and carry on. You're dressed, armed with wool and endurance, ready to meet the day on its own unpleasant terms. And beneath the itch, the weight, and the smell, you feel something small but steady, the pride of being prepared, however poorly, for whatever comes next. Here, the rhythm of daily life wrapped itself around us like fabric, rough, heavy, and honest. The humour stayed quiet but persistent. The dominant sense was touch, and every sentence itched just a little. We stood in wool and irony, feeling how even discomfort can become a kind of comfort when it's all you've ever known. As we follow the thread a little further, the story will stretch into the open fields, where hunger and work trade places with the hours, and survival begins to sound like rhythm. The sky has decided on a colour, a pale, uncertain grey, which in the Middle Ages counts as good weather. The mist that hovered at dawn is fading, revealing a world made of mud, wood, and people pretending to be patient. You step into it fully dressed in the armour of wool and obligation. The day has begun, and like every day, it expects you to earn it. The first sound is metal, a hoe striking stone, the dull rhythm of effort. The second is breathing. Human, animal, the difference barely matters. In your world, every creature labours. Even the wind works overtime, pushing against every roof. Your feet sink slightly into the damp earth as you walk toward the field, and the mud clings to you with the clingy affection of something that knows you'll be back tomorrow. The air is sharp with the smell of wet soil and smoke from early fires. You pass others, on the same path, men carrying tools, women balancing baskets, children trailing behind like unfinished sentences. No one talks much. Talking wastes air better used for staying alive. A nod is enough. A grunt is conversation. You don't need words when the day already speaks for you. At the field's edge, your tools wait. A wooden plough, a hoe, and a rake. Simple inventions that require endless energy. The earth in front of you looks ordinary, but it's not. It's the difference between hunger and hope. You stab the soil with the hoe. The ground resists at first, then sighs open with a noise halfway between surrender and complaint. Each motion feels like lifting the world by handfuls. After a few minutes, you stop feeling your arms. After a few hours, you stop remembering they were ever separate from the tool. Work here isn't a choice. It's the only known method of staying alive. The sun, still hiding behind clouds, marks your progress not by its warmth, but by the changing shadows. You bend, you lift, you breathe, you repeat. A pattern so old it feels sacred. Somewhere in this rhythm, you stop being a person and become a function. You're one of many, a link in a long, muddy chain of survival stretching back and forward through time. By mid-morning, your stomach reminds you that breakfast was not generosity but a rehearsal. You pause briefly, wiping sweat from your forehead, and look toward the distant line of trees. Birds move there freely without purpose, and for a moment you envy them their pointlessness. Then the wind changes, carrying the smell of manure, and the fantasy passes. The land doesn't care that you're tired. It doesn't care that you dreamed once as a child of doing something else, maybe travelling, maybe learning, maybe simply resting. The soil doesn't bargain. It takes what you give and asks for more. You lift the hoe again and start another row. The ground feels endless, but so does hunger, and you've learned which one you can control. Children work beside you, smaller copies of grown-ups with less stamina but equal expectation. One carries water in a bucket half his size. Another drives a pair of oxen forward with shouts too big for his lungs. Childhood here is not an era, but a temporary weakness you outgrow as soon as possible. By 12, you're already an adult who's just shorter and slightly less cynical. Around noon, the sun peeks through the clouds, bright enough to make the mud glisten like dull bronze. Heat rises in waves, turning every breath into a labour. You wipe your brow and taste salt, proof that your body is doing something, though you're not sure what exactly. The village in the distance looks asleep, roof steaming faintly under the sudden warmth. For a moment you wish the day could pause. It doesn't. Lunch, if you're lucky, arrives in a bundle. A hunk of bread, a piece of cheese if the cow's been merciful, and maybe an onion. You sit on a rock and eat slowly, pretending to savour something other than exhaustion. The bread is still hard, the cheese faintly sour, the onion sharp enough to make your eyes water for reasons you can't quite blame on emotion. Still, the act of eating feels civilised. It separates you from the beasts, though not by much. Somewhere nearby, a woman hums softly as she milks a goat. The tune drifts across the field, thin and haunting, the kind of melody that has existed forever and will outlive everyone who hums it. Music here is not for joy. It's a way to mark time without looking at the sun. You find yourself tapping along with the rhythm of your work, and suddenly the day feels a little less endless. Then comes the sound of thunder, not from the sky, but from the Lord's horse as it passes down the road. He rides through occasionally just to remind the village who owns everything that can be seen, touched, or taxed. His armour glints even in the weak light. You pause your work out of habit, head lowered. He doesn't notice you. He never does. He doesn't have to. Power doesn't need to speak to be heard. When the horse disappears, you return to your task. The rhythm resumes. Dig, turn, plant, breathe. A bird lands nearby, searching for worms. It gets what it wants faster than you ever will. You don't take it personally. Envy is a luxury. Fatigue is free. Afternoon drags like a cart through wet soil. Your back aches, your hands sting, and your mind wanders toward impossible fantasies. A life where you wake without a bell, eat without fear, rest without guilt. But then you look at the rows you've made, straight and stubborn, and realise this too is a kind of creation. You're shaping the land. It's just that the land doesn't say thank you. As the light fades, shadows stretch long across the field, and the bell rings again. Evening, finally. You lean on your hoe and breathe deeply, the air thick with the scent of sweat, dirt and accomplishment that no one will ever write poems about. You walk home slowly, your body heavy, your feet moving on memory. Each step is a small victory against gravity's constant invitation to lie down and stop existing. At the edge of the path, you pass an old man sitting on a rock, staring at the horizon. His face is a map of years that refuse to be kind. He nods at you without smiling, a silent greeting between survivors. You nod back, and that's enough. In a place where words are expensive, gestures do the job. By the time you reach your hut, the sky has begun to darken, a deepening blue that promises sleep but not rest. Smoke rises from a dozen chimneys again, each one telling the same story in a different accent. The day has ended, though the work has not. It only pauses, ready to repeat itself tomorrow and the day after that until your hands forget how to stop moving. Inside, your family waits, faces lit by firelight, their clothes stiff, their smiles small but sincere. Someone has already ladled out the evening's pottage. It smells the same as breakfast. It always does. You sit, take a bowl, and begin to eat. The fire cracks, the children yawn, and for a moment, the world feels almost merciful. In this long stretch of the day, we walked through the fields and felt labour turn into prayer. The humour lived in the quiet irony of endless work. The dominant sense was the weight of earth and the rhythm of exhaustion. Through soil, sweat, and repetition, we saw how survival becomes a language, one spoken with calloused hands, As we drift further into the story, the sun will set, the bells will call again, and the night will ask what faith really means when comfort is never guaranteed. The bell rings again, but this time it's not calling you to work. It's calling you to remember why you work. In the fading light of late evening, the sound rolls through the air like a slow heartbeat. Deep, steady, impossible to ignore. You wipe your hands on your tunic, feeling the day's dirt turning into tomorrow's dust, and start walking toward the church. The church sits at the centre of everything. It's not just a building, it's a schedule, a government, and an invisible landlord. You don't live by hours here, you live by bells. They tell you when to wake, when to pray, when to eat, when to stop eating, when to confess, and eventually when to die. Time itself belongs to God, but the church handles the paperwork. You approach the stone structure, rising above the huts like a promise no one fully believes but no one dares to question. Its walls are cold, damp and streaked with moss, its windows painted with saints who stare down in eternal disapproval. The smell of candle wax and old incense spills through the open door. You step inside and feel the temperature drop, as if holiness prefers the chill. The sound changes too. Outside life is noisy, pigs, carts, arguments, but in here, even sound kneels. You find a place near the back. The benches creak beneath you, each one a choir of old wood and old prayers. Around you, people bow their heads. They're the same faces you saw in the field this morning, only now they wear the expressions of people trying to look grateful. The priest enters, tall, thin, wrapped in layers of cloth that catch the candlelight. He moves slowly as if burdened by secrets too holy to set down. His Latin flows through the air, smooth and distant, a language meant for God, not for you. You catch a few words, something about mercy, something about punishment. It's the usual duet. The crowd murmurs responses they don't understand, like passengers repeating instructions on a ship they can't steer. Faith, here, isn't about comprehension. It's about choreography. Stand, kneel, nod, repeat. If you get the order right, you might go to heaven. If not, you'll still go somewhere warm, and for once, warmth doesn't sound appealing. The candles flicker, sending little halos of smoke upward. They're small, fragile suns, reminders that even in darkness, light insists on existing. You stare at them for too long, and your eyes begin to water. For a moment, you wonder if that counts as devotion. When the priest speaks of sin, he does so with the calm of a man who has memorized every human weakness by name. Greed, pride, lust, gluttony. Words that sound heavy even before they land. You nod along, unsure if you're guilty, but positive you've at least come close. Everyone is guilty of something here. The church prefers it that way. It keeps business steady. After the sermon, the priest reminds everyone of their tithes, 1/10 of everything you have, which usually means 1/10 of nothing. Still, you pay in grain, in eggs, in silence. You hand over what you can and hope heaven appreciates the gesture. Money is rare, but fear is abundant, and fear is the church's preferred currency. Outside, night is settled, thick and calm. The moon hides behind a veil of clouds, and the air smells of damp stone and extinguished candles. The priest's voice still echoes in your head. Obedience is salvation. You're not sure if he means obedience to God or to himself, but questioning isn't encouraged. Doubt is considered a spiritual infection, best cured with prayer, confession, or, if necessary, fire. You walk home slowly, your feet squelching in the mud. Every few steps, the sound of the bell still lingers, a soft vibration under the ribs. It's both comforting and unsettling, like being watched by something too vast to hate. You pass the crossroads where a small wooden cross marks the grave of someone who died in the last plague. It's unmarked, like most graves. Names are for the living, the dead are beyond introductions. Back home, The hearth is low but still burning. Your family sits in silence, the kind born not from tension but from fatigue. Someone whispers a short prayer before eating, not for abundance, that would be greedy, but for enough. Enough warmth, enough food, enough forgiveness to get through another day. Faith in this house is not a sermon, it's a habit, like breathing or mending socks. You eat in near darkness, the only light coming from the faint orange glow of coals. The shadows on the wall move like ghosts with bad timing. The fire pops softly, and the sound reminds you of the church candles earlier. Little sparks insisting on existing despite the cold. It's almost comforting. When the meal is done, you lie down again on your straw mattress, pulling the heavy blanket over your shoulders. The fleas greet you like old acquaintances. You stare at the ceiling, watching smoke rise through the cracks, and you whisper a few words you barely remember. They might be a prayer, they might be a wish. Either way, you hope someone or something is listening. The church tells you that heaven is a perfect place, without hunger or pain or endless work. It's an idea so beautiful that you almost forgive the people who keep it locked behind ceremony and Latin. You picture it sometimes, not gold streets or choirs, but simply a world where mornings smell clean and no one has to fear the bell. If that's heaven, you think, it's worth believing in. If it's not, you'll never know the difference. The last sound you hear before sleep is the wind against the thatch roof, low, steady, and almost like breathing. It mixes with the fading ring of the church bell in your memory, creating a rhythm that feels ancient and endless. Faith and fear, always side by side, whispering their quiet promises into the dark. Here, belief folded itself into daily routine. Bells in place of clocks, prayers in place of certainty. The humour stayed subtle and tired, the dominant sense was sound, and the rhythm of faith moved like a slow pulse through mud and memory. We saw how obedience became safety, and how fear, handled gently, became hope. As we drift further into the story, the night deepens, the fire dims, and the quiet turns toward those who had the hardest time of all. The women who lived, worked, and fought in silence. The fire burns low, the smoke hanging close to the ceiling, and the night outside hums with insects and wind. Inside, the air is heavy with the smell of wool, soup, and silence. You listen to the breathing of your family, steady and tired. The day has ended, but for the women here, the end of the day is just another beginning. There is always one more thing to do before sleep, and often one more reason not to rest. A woman's life in this world begins early and ends quietly. At 12, she's already someone's responsibility. By 14, someone's wife. By 15, someone's mother. If she's lucky, she'll live long enough to see her own daughter repeat the same script, line for line. If she's unlucky, and most are, childbirth will take her. Not in pain's absence, but in its company. The hut glows softly from the fire's red light. A woman kneels near it, stirring what's left of the evening meal. Her hands move without thinking. Every gesture learned from her mother, who learned it from hers. She hums quietly, a tune without words, maybe a prayer, maybe just a sound to keep herself company. Her face is lined not by age but by repetition. She doesn't look up when someone enters. She doesn't need to. She already knows who it is by the weight of their steps. In this village, women are expected to endure everything gracefully: hunger, childbirth, widowhood, even injustice. And to do it without raising their voices. They are the soft gears that keep the machine running while pretending not to exist. The men go to the fields, the women remain, managing the invisible labour that fills every corner of the home. They mend, wash, feed, pray, scold, and heal. They don't ask to be thanked because they've never seen anyone else thanked either, but in a world ruled by superstition, being competent is dangerous. If a crop fails, people blame the weather. If it fails twice, they blame a woman. The fire crackles as she takes a small pot from the hearth. Inside is a paste made from herbs and fat, medicine for the sick child sleeping in the corner. It smells sharp and earthy. She spreads it gently across the boy's chest, whispering a small prayer. It's not magic, but it looks enough like it to frighten her neighbours. They've seen her gathering herbs in the forest, and they remember stories told by the priest. Stories where women who talk to plants also talk to darker things. The village runs on fear as much as on faith. If the rain doesn't come, if a baby dies, if a cow stops giving milk, someone must be responsible. The devil is too big to blame, so the villagers choose someone closer, someone visible, someone already accustomed to being ignored. The word witch isn't said out loud here, not often, not yet. But the idea walks freely among them. It's a shape that fits too many people too well. A widow with knowledge of herbs, a young girl who smiles at the wrong time, an old woman who refuses to die politely. Each one carries a shadow she didn't create. The priest doesn't help. From the pulpit, he warns that women are weaker, more easily tempted. Eve's mistake has a long half-life. He speaks of purity and obedience, of submission as salvation. He reminds them that women are vessels, holy if they stay still, dangerous if they overflow. The men nod. The women listen quietly, their minds busy counting tasks waiting at home. Outside, the wind picks up. The trees sway, whispering secrets they've heard too many times. A few stars manage to break through the clouds, and their cold light falls on the thatched roofs like spilled silver. Inside one of those huts, a woman sits alone, sewing by candlelight. The room smells of wax and wool. The candle's flame trembles with every draught. Her child is sleeping beside her, a small bundle wrapped in a blanket she once used as a shawl. She looks at him and feels something between love and exhaustion. A feeling that doesn't have a name yet because no one has had the time to invent it. She remembers the women who came before her, their names fading like ink in rain. They all lived the same way, giving life, losing blood, mending torn clothes and torn futures. The only difference is how much they dared to know. One of them, her grandmother, was once accused of curing a fever with wildflowers and prayer. It worked, which was suspicious. The priest said healing belonged to God, and anything that worked too well must have borrowed power from elsewhere. The girl who carried the herbs was questioned, then avoided. People stopped asking her for help, then stopped speaking to her entirely. She moved to the edge of the forest. No one remembers what happened after that. They only remember to warn their daughters not to be clever. Even now, centuries later, the same instinct lingers. The fear of women who know things, who fix things, who refuse to fade quietly. Knowledge is a kind of rebellion, compassion, a risk. In every village, there's always one woman who knows too much, and everyone else agrees quietly that it's better not to stand too close when the sky decides to punish her for it. Back at the fire, the woman finishes her work. The child's breathing has steadied, his fever softening beneath her touch. She exhales slowly, feeling both relief and the faint dread that someone might notice. She stirs the coals, adds another log, and whispers the same small prayer again, not for mercy, but for invisibility. Outside, a dog barks, its echo rolling through the fields and bouncing off the dark forest beyond. The night feels larger than it should, filled with unseen movements and old stories. In this world, the darkness is not just the absence of light, it's the space where fear lives and grows. You lie in your bed, listening to the fire's soft pop. The woman's prayer blends with the wind, and you can almost hear the centuries turning over in their sleep. In the morning, the bell will ring again, and she will rise to do everything she did today: cook, wash, care, endure, without complaint, without recognition. And if the world ever calls her a witch, she will lower her eyes and keep working anyway. In this part of the story, we sat beside the hearth where strength was disguised as obedience. The humour turned faint and fragile. The dominant sense was sound, the soft hum of prayer against crackling wood. Beneath it all lay the quiet irony that knowledge could be both healing and fatal. As we follow the thread a little further, dawn will return, and we'll step into the open square where justice becomes entertainment and cruelty wears the mask of law. The night retreats slowly, as if reluctant to hand the world back to daylight. A thin fog hovers over the thatched roofs, carrying the smell of smoke and manure like a warning label for the living. You wake to the familiar sound, that same iron bell, ringing in a tone that feels too cheerful for what it means. Another day has arrived, which in this time is not so much a blessing as an assignment. You stretch your arms and feel the ache of work already waiting. But today there's something else in the air. A murmur, the faint hum of excitement that doesn't belong to routine. The neighbours are whispering, children darting between houses, adults pretending not to be interested. Word spreads fast in a village that has nothing else to spread. Someone has been accused of stealing grain, or maybe insulting a priest, or maybe something much worse. No one's sure yet. It doesn't matter. The day's entertainment has arrived. Justice in the Middle Ages is a social event. It gathers people the way fire gathers moths. Drawn by light, even when they know it burns, you join. A slow parade toward the village square, drawn as much by boredom as by duty. Around you, people shuffle through the mud, their breath fogging in the cold morning air. No one speaks loudly, but everyone is already rehearsing their opinions. The square itself is little more than a patch of dirt surrounded by crooked buildings and moral certainty. At the centre stands a wooden post, a few rough planks and a rope that looks older than mercy. The priest is already there, wrapped in heavy robes that make him look larger than forgiveness. Beside him stands the bailiff, holding a staff carved with symbols meant to look official. The accused kneels in the mud, hands tied, eyes down. A man or a woman, depending on the story you heard. Their guilt is still a rumour, but their punishment is a certainty. You find a place near the back. The crowd moves like one creature, shifting, whispering, breathing together. The air smells of wet earth and judgment. Children cling to their mothers' skirts, wide-eyed, curious. For them, this is theatre. For their parents, it's reassurance. Proof that the rules still work, that sin still has consequences, that the universe hasn't forgotten to balance its books. The priest raises his voice. It carries across the square, smooth and sharp, the way authority always does. He speaks of order, of divine law, of obedience. The villagers nod in rhythm as if the sermon were a familiar lullaby. You can't tell whether he's talking about God's justice or his own, and maybe he doesn't know either. The speech grows louder, peppered with words like wickedness and redemption, big round sounds that make people feel both guilty and safe. Then comes the accusation. The charge changes with each retelling: theft, blasphemy, sorcery, or simply being inconvenient at the wrong time. None of them really require proof. In a world where few can read and fewer can reason, evidence is a luxury. The only testimony that matters is belief, and belief here is contagious. You can see it spreading through the crowd, tightening their shoulders, sharpening their eyes. It feels good, this shared certainty. It's easier than fear. If the accused confesses, the punishment will be quick. A beating, a fine, a scar to remember. If they deny it, things get creative. The law here prefers spectacle to subtlety. It believes that truth is a physical property, something that can be extracted through pain or proven by absurdity. The priest explains that the Almighty works through signs, and signs, conveniently, look exactly like whatever the church needs them to. A bucket of water is brought forward. You recognise it. The same kind used for washing, now repurposed for revelation. The accused is tied, hands and feet, and lowered into the cold, muddy liquid. If they float, it means the water rejects them. Guilty. If they sink, the water accepts them. Innocent, but drowned. Either way, the system rarely complains about inefficiency. You watch quietly. The crowd leans in. No one moves to stop it. Some murmur prayers, others hide smiles. It's not cruelty exactly, not yet. It's curiosity. Humans have always mistaken one for the other. When the bucket tips and the body gasps, the crowd gasps too. A shared exhalation of relief that it's not them. You turn away for a moment, pretending to look at the sky. But there's no sky today, only cloud and smoke. Sometimes the ordeal involves fire instead of water. A red-hot iron pressed to the skin. A coin dropped in boiling oil. The rule is simple. If the wound heals cleanly, you're innocent. If it festers, you're guilty. Of course, most wounds fester, because no one here has ever heard of germs. You imagine explaining to them that invisible creatures cause infections. They'd nod politely, then probably accuse you of witchcraft. Science in this century is indistinguishable from sorcery, and sorcery is just curiosity performed too confidently. The priest declares the verdict and the crowd murmurs approval. The condemned is led away, coughing, shivering, still human enough to look back. For a moment, their eyes meet yours. Not pleading, not angry, just tired. You look down. It's the polite thing to do. As the crowd disperses, laughter bubbles up, thin but real. Children chase each other through puddles. Adults exchange gossip. The day resumes its shape. Justice has been done, which means the world feels slightly safer again, though no one could say why. The priest walks back toward the church, the bailiff toward the tavern. Only the stains in the mud remain to remember what happened here. You walk home slowly, your boots heavy, your thoughts heavier. The same bell that called you to witness now calls you to prayer. It rings with the same calm tone, as if nothing has happened at all. Maybe that's the point. The church doesn't see punishment as cruelty. It sees it as maintenance, like repairing a roof that leaks sin. Still, you can't help wondering what happens when the next storm comes, and the roof is made of people. Back home, the fire waits. Your family sits quietly around it. Someone asks what happened in the square. You shrug. Justice, you say, because it's the shortest answer that keeps peace. No one presses further. Everyone understands the value of not knowing too much. The night grows colder. Wind sneaks through the cracks in the walls, carrying faint echoes from the square. Voices, laughter, a memory of fear pretending to be entertainment. You lie down, pulling the blanket up to your chin. The straw rustles beneath you. Somewhere, the bell rings again, softer now, more like a lullaby. It doesn't mark time, it marks control. You close your eyes and think of the person from earlier, the one whose face you tried not to remember. You wonder if they're still breathing. You wonder if, in another life, you might have been them. The thought is small and sharp, like a splinter under the skin. You push it away and let sleep take you, heavy and dreamless like stones sinking in water. This part of our journey led us into the square, where justice wore its loudest costume and fear passed for faith. The humour thinned but didn't vanish. It hovered in the strange calm of people doing cruel things politely. The dominant sense was sound, the crowd's breath, the bell's authority, the silence after the verdict. Beneath it all lingered a question. How do you keep believing in mercy when punishment becomes a performance? As we follow the story's fading footsteps, the day will soften again toward hunger, warmth, and the fragile miracle of surviving long enough to laugh. The morning begins with a chill that feels older than the sun. The bell rings again, a sound that no longer surprises you. It marks time the way waves mark the shore, endlessly without progress. You sit up, wrapped in the same blanket, the same air, the same life. But something feels different today. There's a quiet heaviness in the village, a pause between sounds, like the world itself is holding its breath. Someone has died. Again, it isn't dramatic. Death here never is. It's ordinary, expected, even punctual. Someone's mother, someone's child, someone's neighbour. Names don't travel far in a place this small. The body will be buried before sunset, because waiting invites animals and questions. You put on your boots and step outside, joining the slow procession of people walking toward the churchyard. The ground squelches underfoot, wet with last night's rain, or maybe with everything that has come before it. The air smells of damp soil and wax. A few candles flicker inside glass jars, their light trembling against the wind. The priest waits near a wooden coffin that looks more like a box for tools than for a person. He reads from a book no one can understand, in a language meant to impress heaven and exclude everyone else. The villagers bow their heads anyway. They don't need to know the words, they already know the meaning. Life is short, God is long, and neither negotiates. The coffin is lowered into the ground. The ropes creak, the soil shifts. The sound is dull but final. Someone crosses themselves. Someone else sighs. A baby cries because someone has to. The priest throws a handful of dirt over the coffin. He says that the body will return to the earth, that the soul will rise, and that everything happens for a reason. No one asks what the reason is. No one ever does. Questions take too much energy, and energy is for the living. You stand there, feeling the weight of mud on your boots. The person being buried could have been anyone, could have been you. The thought doesn't frighten you. It just feels factual, like the weather. Death isn't a mystery here. It's a routine. You've seen it too many times to romanticize it. The only surprise is who gets called next. Sometimes it's plague. Sometimes childbirth. Sometimes a cut that got angry and never forgave. A cough in the wrong season. A spoiled loaf of bread. A bad dream interpreted too literally. The world doesn't discriminate. It just chooses. Life expectancy is 30, maybe 40 if you're too stubborn to die on schedule. You've met children who look like old men and old men who look surprised to still be here. When plague comes, it travels quietly. No thunder, no warning, just the slow discovery that everyone you know is coughing. The air fills with the smell of vinegar, smoke and prayers muttered under breath. People hang herbs around their necks, lavender, sage, sometimes garlic. The scent fills the streets, sharp and hopeful. No one knows what helps and what doesn't. Still, doing something feels better than doing nothing. Hope, after all, is its own kind of medicine. The priest tells you that disease is punishment, that the righteous will be spared. You look around and see the righteous dying anyway. Faith wavers, but only in silence. To speak it aloud is dangerous. To think it is human. You remind yourself that God must be busy. There are too many people to manage, and heaven doesn't take suggestions. In better seasons, death comes slower but never stops. Winter freezes the weak, summer boils the rest. Food spoils, water turns on you, and childbirth remains the most dangerous job in the village. When a woman survives it, people whisper congratulations to her as though she has outwitted the universe. When she doesn't, they whisper something else, not sorrow, but acceptance. The world is full of ways to die and remarkably short on ways to live. Yet, somehow, people keep trying. After the burial, you see them laughing softly by the well. A child runs past with a stick and a round of wood, turning death into background noise. Someone starts to hum a tune, something familiar, something older than language. The melody wraps itself around the square, gentle and stubborn. Life, like the song, insists on continuing, even when no one remembers how it started. You walk back toward your home, the path muddy and familiar. The huts look the same, but the air feels cleaner somehow, as if morning has briefly scrubbed the dust from the world. Inside, your family is busy with the daily chores, stirring the pot, mending a sleeve, feeding the goat. The smell of stew fills the air again, earthy and repetitive. It's not celebration, but it's proof that the living still believe in tomorrow. You sit down by the fire. Your hands tremble slightly, not from fear, but from fatigue. You think about the person just buried, about how quickly the world folded them away. You realise that in this village, memory doesn't last long. The past is heavy and storage is limited. People forget not because they are cruel, but because remembering everything would make survival impossible. Forgetting here is an act of mercy. The fire crackles. Sparks jump upward, disappearing into the darkness above. You wonder where they go, whether they vanish or simply turn into something else. The priest says the soul rises to heaven, but you prefer the image of it becoming light, a small wandering star joining all the others that refuse to stay dead. You think that maybe that's what immortality really means, not living forever, but being remembered for one moment longer than you expected. Later that night, you step outside again. The sky is wide and cold. The moon, a dull coin pressed into its surface. The air tastes of frost and wood smoke. You look toward the churchyard, barely visible beyond the trees. It's quiet now, peaceful, almost gentle. The wind moves through the grass in slow, whispering waves, like a lullaby for those who no longer need sleep. You stand there for a while, listening. The world, for all its cruelty, sounds calm. Maybe this is why people keep believing. Not because they understand, but because they can't stand the silence without a story to fill it. You whisper a few words of your own, not to anyone specific, just to the night, just to be heard. Then you turn back toward the door, toward the fire, toward the next meal and the next morning. Death will come again, but so will breakfast. The two are not opposites here. They are neighbours sharing the same fence. Inside, the fire has burned low. You lie down on your straw bed, pulling the blanket close. You think of all the people who once slept this way and all the ones who will. The rhythm continues. Birth, work, hunger, laughter, loss. You realise that maybe the miracle isn't avoiding death. It's finding reasons to live before it arrives. You close your eyes and smile faintly, because somehow, despite everything you do, here, we stood beside the fresh grave and felt how routine can swallow even sorrow. The humour returned quietly, born from the absurd calm of a world that keeps going no matter how often it breaks. The dominant sense was sound, the slow rustle of wind through grass, the quiet breathing of those left behind. Beneath it all lingered a truth both harsh and strangely peaceful. In a world that ends early, every small joy becomes sacred. As we drift further into the story, the bell will fall silent, and our path will carry us far from the mud, toward cold palaces, candlelight, and a woman who learned to rule instead of endure. The air in northern Europe tastes of snow and restraint. In the quiet German principality of Stettin, a young girl named Sophie stares at the frost that paints lace across her window. She's 14, clever, and already certain that cleverness is dangerous. Her mother has taught her that obedience is survival, but Sophie has also discovered another truth, that silence is a form of study. You can learn everything while pretending to listen. The house smells of polished wood, damp wool, and ambition. Her mother Johanna moves through rooms like a storm wrapped in lace. She is strict, distant, forever measuring Sophie's worth in glances and posture. The girl's job is to be flawless. Not happy, not safe, just flawless enough to be chosen by someone important. She learns quickly that affection is a kind of currency, and she doesn't have enough to spend. Sophie's education is unusual for a girl of her time. She reads French novels by candlelight, studies languages as if they're secret codes, and practices curtsies until her knees ache. Her tutors say she is bright. Her mother says she is inconvenient. But in this century, Inconvenient minds often end up on thrones or in trouble. One winter evening, a letter arrives. It bears the seal of Russia, a land so distant it might as well be a storybook. The message is short, formal, and absolute. The Empress Elizabeth requires a bride for her nephew, the Grand Duke Peter. Sophie is a possibility. Her mother nearly faints from pride. Sophie feels something else entirely. Fear, yes, but also the faint spark of curiosity, the feeling that fate might finally be paying attention. The journey begins in a carriage that groans against the frozen roads. Sophie watches villages blur past, grey, narrow, smoke-stained, while her mother rehearses the performance of gratitude. Russia, they're told, is cold but magnificent. Its palaces glitter with gold and suspicion. Its people drink deeply, pray loudly, and smile rarely. The girl listens to these warnings and stores them like instructions. When the carriage crosses the border, the wind changes character. It no longer whispers, it roars. Snowflakes sting her face like advice she didn't ask for. They arrive in St. Petersburg, a city that gleams like an over-polished coin, beautiful, expensive, and cold to the touch. It is winter of the year 1744. Sophie steps down from the carriage and feels the weight of history pressing against her skin, though history for now has no idea who she is. The palace smells of wax and fur. Servants glide across marble floors, silent as rumours. The Empress Elizabeth receives them in a hall large enough to fit Sophie's entire hometown. She's draped in jewels that flash like tiny suns, her voice soft but dangerous. When she smiles, everyone bows lower. Sophie bows too, low enough to feel the chill of the floor through her dress. The Empress studies her for a long moment, then nods. The decision is silent but final. The girl from nowhere has been chosen. Over the next week, Sophie learns her new world by observation. The court is a maze of silk and gossip. Men bow with one hand and betray with the other. Women laugh behind fans sharp enough to cut. Every smile contains a calculation. Sophie keeps hers gentle and unreadable. She learns that in palaces, truth is heavier than gold and must be carried carefully. Her fiancé, the Grand Duke Peter, is everything she is not. Impulsive, childish, fascinated by toy soldiers and the memory of a Prussian father who never loved him. He plays war with real weapons and emotions with none. The court tolerates him because the Empress loves him, but love, like winter, is rarely enough to keep anyone warm. Sophie studies him quietly, not as a future husband, but as a puzzle. Every piece she fits together makes her own future clearer. If she is to survive here, she must become someone else entirely. The first step is faith. Conversion to the Russian Orthodox Church is required, not suggested. The ceremony is grand, thick with incense and expectation. The church glows with hundreds of candles, their flames trembling in the draughts that slip through marble cracks. The smell of wax mixes with the faint tang of iron from the censers. Sophie kneels before the altar, her hands steady, her mind even steadier. The priest chants in a language she barely understands, but she catches the rhythm of power in it. When he finishes, she rises not as Sophie of Anhalt-Zerbst, but as Catherine Alexeyevna, daughter of the church and soon of an empire. Her mother watches proudly, but the pride feels borrowed. Catherine feels something else. Rebirth, maybe, or something colder that only sounds like it. The name settles on her shoulders like a fur cloak, soft and heavy. She's no longer a guest in this country. She's a participant in its story. The months that follow are a slow education in survival. She learns how to speak the Russian language with grace and the Russian court with silence. She reads books no one else bothers to open. Philosophy, history, the new science creeping westward from Europe. She writes her thoughts in notebooks she hides under her pillow, ideas too bold to share but too sharp to let go of. Sometimes, late at night, She looks out the window at the frozen river and whispers to herself in French, the language of ambition. It sounds strange in the cold air, like a secret trying to stay warm. She sees her future clearly, though she doesn't yet know how to reach it. Her husband will never rule wisely. The Empress will not live forever. The Empire will need something, someone, to keep it from collapsing under its own grandeur. Catherine begins to imagine the shape of power not as a crown, but as a flame, controlled, deliberate, always fed by knowledge. In a place where everyone fights for influence, she chooses a quieter weapon: intellect. One evening, while snow piles against the palace windows, Catherine sits by a single candle. Its light dances across her face, turning thought into shadow and shadow into resolve. She dips a quill into ink and begins to write. Not a diary, not yet, but a promise. That she will never again be only what others decide she should be. The candle burns lower, the wax pooling like spilled light. Outside, the wind howls across the river. Inside, another kind of storm begins. When she finally blows out the candle, the room falls into darkness. For the first time, she doesn't feel small in it. She feels hidden, and hiding in this world is the first stage of ruling. She lies down, her breath fogging in the cold air, and whispers her new name once more as if testing its weight. Catherine. It fits like armour. In this quiet passage, the humour softened into admiration. The dominant sense was sight, candlelight flickering on polished stone, frost reflecting ambition. Every image glowed with the warmth of a mind waking up to itself. Through snow, silence and ceremony, a girl learned that intellect could be sharper than any blade. As we drift further into the story, the palace lights will grow brighter, the whispers sharper, and Catherine's patience will become her sharpest weapon, one that leaves no mark but changes everything. The palace looks different in daylight. Gold loses its warmth when the sun reveals how much dust clings to it. Catherine walks through the long corridors, the sound of her steps swallowed by carpets thick enough to muffle regret. Every hallway smells faintly of wax and perfume, of too many secrets preserved beneath the same varnish. It is beautiful, yes, but beauty here is a performance, not a comfort. Her new husband, Grand Duke Peter, is nowhere to be seen. He is probably in one of his private rooms, playing with miniature soldiers and staging imaginary wars. Catherine learned quickly that he prefers his wooden army to real people. They are more obedient, less complex, easier to conquer. He talks often of his idol, the Prussian king, Frederick the Great. Catherine smiles when he does, because smiling is safer than speaking. Inside, she files each word away like evidence. Their marriage, like the palace, shines on the surface and cracks quietly underneath. There are dinners filled with ceremonial laughter, formal bows, polite silences, the choreography of affection performed for the benefit of others. The courtiers gossip like birds trapped in the rafters. They whisper about her accent, her intellect, her inability to flatter convincingly. She listens, never interrupts, and learns. Gossip, she discovers, is just another way to gather intelligence. Catherine's education never stops. She reads at night by candlelight, long after the palace has gone still. Voltaire, Montesquieu, Diderot, the voices of a different world whisper from her pages, speaking of liberty, equality, and reason, words that would sound treasonous if spoken aloud here. She reads them anyway, slowly, savouring each thought like forbidden fruit. The candle burns close to her fingertips, and she doesn't move it. Some knowledge, she knows, is supposed to sting a little. Peter, meanwhile, throws lavish feasts that end in arguments and accidents. He drinks too much, laughs too loudly, and trusts too easily. The courtiers pretend to adore him. They bow as he passes, then smirk as soon as his back turns. Catherine pretends too, but her pretense is made of iron. She laughs when he does, asks nothing, expects nothing, and waits. Patience, she decides, is a weapon that leaves no wound but wins every battle. When the Empress Elizabeth visits, the entire court transforms into a living painting. Servants scrub the floors until the marble reflects their exhaustion. Musicians practice until their fingers blister. Catherine stands at the Empress's side, still and smiling, like a well-trained shadow. The older woman's gaze is heavy with expectation and suspicion. Elizabeth adores her nephew, tolerates his wife, and trusts no one. Catherine bows deeper, speaks less, and survives longer. At night she writes again. Her journals are careful, observations disguised as reflections, opinions hidden behind metaphors. She records what she cannot say, that her husband is unfit to rule, that the empire trembles beneath the weight of its own excess, that she feels a strange destiny pressing against her ribs like an unspoken word. She doesn't call it ambition. Ambition is dangerous in a woman. She calls it duty. The seasons change. Outside, snow falls so gently it seems almost polite. Inside, the air grows colder for other reasons. The marriage, never passionate, becomes ceremonial. They live together as politely as strangers in a library. Rumours bloom like frost, whispers of affairs, of heirs that never come, of alliances forming in the shadows. Catherine ignores them. She knows that attention is the oxygen gossip needs to survive. She starves it quietly. One evening, Peter bursts into her chambers, drunk and triumphant. He has won a game of cards or lost one, it hardly matters. His laughter fills the room, loud and careless. He stumbles toward her, spilling wine across the floor. "You're too serious," he slurs. "Too quiet." Catherine smiles faintly. "Someone in this palace has to be," she says. He doesn't hear the edge in her tone. He never does. He leaves soon after, forgetting why he came. The next morning she wakes before dawn. The palace is silent except for the faint creak of servants beginning their routines. She walks to the window and watches her breath fog the glass. Outside, snow covers the gardens in white perfection, hiding all the broken branches beneath. It reminds her of the court itself, smooth on top, chaos underneath. She wonders how long a world built on appearance can last. Days blend into weeks. She attends banquets, smiles at diplomats, listens to speeches about glory and duty. Her role is clear. Be graceful, be invisible, produce an heir. She manages 2 of the 3. The courtiers underestimate her because she allows them to. They see her as harmless, and that is her greatest defence. Behind every curtsy, she hides calculation. Behind every polite yes, a silent strategy takes form. Her closest allies are few. A lady-in-waiting who loves gossip but hates cruelty. A librarian who lends her books wrapped in plain covers, and a guard who bows too low to avoid suspicion. They form a quiet constellation around her, small points of loyalty in a sky of intrigue. Through them, she learns what matters most. The Empress is ill, the nobles are restless, and Peter, her husband, is collecting enemies faster than allies. The empire, she realises, is a house of cards built in a storm, and one day the wind will turn. Catherine spends her evenings in her study, the fire crackling softly beside her. The warmth pools around her hands as she writes. She doesn't plan a coup yet. She plans understanding. She studies power the way natural philosophers study light, examining how it bends, how it reflects, how it can blind those who look too directly at it. She knows she cannot seize control by force, not yet. But when opportunity knocks, she intends to open the door already holding the pen. There are moments of beauty too, though brief. Candlelight flickering across gilt mirrors, music drifting from another room, the smell of cinnamon wine on winter nights. Sometimes she allows herself to feel wonder, even in captivity. The palace may be a cage, but it is a cage with books and fire, and that makes it survivable. She tells herself that knowledge is a key, slow to turn, but sure. In the quiet between midnight and dawn, Catherine sits by the window once more. The frost patterns on the glass look like delicate maps, tiny empires of ice forming and fading with every breath. She traces one with her finger and whispers, "Patience." The word fogs the glass, then vanishes, leaving only her reflection staring back. Young, composed, and already older than her years. Somewhere beyond the walls the future stirs, restless and watchful. In this gilded stillness the humour turned crisp, made of irony and candlelight. The dominant sense was sight, the shimmer of gold, the shadows of books, the faint glow of frost. Every detail whispered restraint, every silence held strategy. Catherine's cage glittered, but her mind kept walking free inside it. As we follow the trail of her thoughts further, the sound of hoofbeats will grow louder, the air sharper, and history itself will lean forward to listen, because patience, once finished ripening, always remembers to act. The air of St. Petersburg in early summer is thick and electric, as if the clouds themselves are waiting for a decision. The year is 1762, though few in the palace dare to mark it aloud. Catherine sits at her writing desk, the candlelight trembling against a draft that seems to come from nowhere. Her pen hesitates above the page. The words she's about to write could alter everything, or end her entirely. Her husband, now Emperor Peter III, rules as if he's still a boy playing war in the nursery. He wears uniforms not to lead armies but to look impressive in portraits. He insults the church, alienates the guards, and praises foreign kings as if Russia were a toy to be traded. Even his laughter sounds imported. Catherine listens, watches, waits. She has done that all her life, waited for. Foolish men to underestimate her. In the corridors, rumours move faster than servants. Some say the emperor plans to imprison her, others that he intends to send her away to a convent. She walks the halls calmly, her face unreadable, her voice steady. Inside, her mind ticks like a clock built for revolution. She knows that power doesn't announce itself. It slips quietly into rooms where no one's looking. It begins, as history often does, with a whisper. One of her allies, a guardsman with eyes that see too much, leans close and murmurs, "They are ready." The phrase is small, but the meaning is enormous. It means the army regiments stationed in the capital are loyal. To her, not to him. It means the moment she has imagined for years has finally unfolded from possibility into shape. She nods once, nothing more. A nod is safer than joy. Joy makes noise. Before dawn, the streets still wrapped in mist. She dresses simply. No jewels, no crown. Only the dark green of the regimental cloak. The silk brushes her skin like a reminder. Appearances matter, but excess betrays intention. She steps into a carriage with a handful of trusted officers. The horses snort clouds into the morning air. Hoofbeats echo like distant drums. They ride to the barracks. The city is half asleep, its silence fragile. Inside the walls, soldiers stand waiting. Rough men with cold eyes, men who have buried too many promises. When they see her, a few hesitate. Then one kneels, then another. Within minutes, the sound of knees meeting stone fills the courtyard. Catherine steps forward, her breath visible in the early light. "Brothers," she begins softly, her voice carrying farther than it should. "You serve Russia. So do I." There's no grand speech, no dramatic flourish. The moment doesn't need them. Power, when it's real, doesn't shout. It chooses calm. She holds up a small cross, kisses it once, and swears to protect the empire. The soldiers cheer, the sound low and rough, like thunder caught in a chest. In that instant, an empire shifts its allegiance without blood. Back in the palace, Peter wakes late. He thinks he hears distant noise but assumes it's another festival. He never learned to recognize danger when it sounds polite. By the time he sends for his guards, they have already chosen a different master. The corridors, once filled with flattery, now hum with quiet betrayal. He flees toward his summer residence, still in disbelief that anyone would dare replace him. Catherine rides toward the Winter Palace. The streets begin to fill, merchants pausing mid-transaction, peasants staring from alleys, women clutching shawls tighter. They whisper her name like a prayer that has suddenly decided to work. She feels the weight of it, each syllable a mixture of faith and fear. The air smells of rain and revolution, a scent that clings to everything it touches. Inside the palace, the Empress who began as an outsider takes her place on the throne. There is no coronation, no orchestra, no crown yet, just a woman standing in a room that finally belongs to her. She speaks quietly, her voice echoing off marble and memory. Russia must be ruled by reason, she says. The courtiers bow, some out of loyalty, others out of survival. She understands the difference but accepts both. Hours later, word arrives. Peter has been captured. He is alive, confused, still insisting that all of this must be some misunderstanding. Catherine listens in silence. A messenger waits for her command. She gives none. History, she has learned, can do the rest on its own. A few days later, the former emperor is found dead under uncertain circumstances. Officially, he died in an argument with his captors. Unofficially, he died of being unnecessary. Catherine never admits to involvement, and no one dares to ask. Her reign begins, not with fanfare, but with a deep exhale, the kind that sounds like relief disguised as composure. That night she stands alone by the window of the Winter Palace. The Neva River glimmers below, reflecting the lanterns of a city that still doesn't quite believe what has happened. The air smells of wet stone and smoke from celebratory fires. Her reflection in the glass looks both younger and older than she feels. She traces it with one finger, the way she once traced frost as a girl in Germany. Sometimes, she whispers, history turns on a locked door and steady nerves. The candle beside her flickers. The flame bends, then straightens again. Outside, hoofbeats fade into silence. Inside, the Empire waits for instruction. In the following days, she writes letters to foreign courts, carefully phrased to make her ascension sound inevitable, even righteous. She thanks allies, forgives enemies, and redefines treason with a diplomat's smile. Europe reads her words and decides, mostly out of convenience, to believe them. Even Voltaire writes to congratulate her, half admiration, half curiosity, as if wondering whether enlightenment and empire can truly share a room. Catherine answers him graciously. She quotes philosophy, flatters modestly, and avoids the subject of corpses. Politics, she has learned, is the art of telling truth so gently that it sounds like reassurance. The coronation, when it finally comes, is a ceremony of precision. The cathedral glows with hundreds of candles. Gold leaf, jewels, silk. The air itself seems to shimmer. As the crown is lowered onto her head, she feels both the weight and the warmth of it. Power is heavy, but it radiates heat, like fire carefully controlled. She remembers that winter night years ago, the cold breath fogging against a window pane, and realizes that the girl named Sophie has finally disappeared completely. The Empress Catherine stands in her place, calm, composed, unstoppable. She has rewritten her fate with silence and strategy. The choir sings, voices rising into a ceiling painted with angels who look mildly surprised. When it ends, she doesn't smile. She doesn't need to. Everyone in the room already understands. The quietest person in the palace is now the loudest name in the empire. Later, alone again, she removes the crown and places it on a velvet cushion. The room grows still. She studies the flame of a nearby candle, its small movements hypnotic. Power, she thinks, is exactly like that. Beautiful, fragile, and always in danger of going out if you breathe too hard. In this chapter of still fires and soft footsteps, The humour glimmered like the edge of a blade. The dominant sense was sound turned into silence, the hoofbeats, the murmurs, the whisper that became law. The warmth came from candlelight on polished gold and from a woman's pulse steadying into command. Through restraint and resolve, Catherine claimed her empire not by storm but by calm. As we drift further into the story, the flame of intellect will grow brighter, and the light of reason will try, briefly, beautifully, to outshine the shadows it was born from. The candles burn longer now. Their flames sway in the quiet draughts of the winter palace, throwing soft light against marble walls that have seen too many rulers come and go. Catherine walks slowly through the corridors, trailing her fingers along the cold stone, thinking about what must come next. She's inherited a throne, yes, but thrones are just chairs that history dares you to sit in. What she wants is something more durable: order, reason, a nation that doesn't collapse every time a monarch sneezes. Outside, the air smells of damp earth and wet birch. Spring is arriving reluctantly, as if afraid of disappointment. Inside, courtiers already whisper about reform, though none of them can agree on what the word means. Catherine listens to all of them, smiles at half, and writes her own definition. Reform, she decides, is the art of appearing merciful while quietly rearranging everything. The age she rules in calls itself enlightened. Europe is full of men with powdered wigs and heavy opinions, declaring that reason is the light that will save humanity. Catherine agrees, mostly. She writes letters to these philosophers, quoting their ideas with precision and charm. Voltaire replies, calling her the Star of the North. She smiles at the phrase, aware that stars shine best when viewed from a distance. Her desk is rarely empty. Stacks of parchment rise like miniature fortresses, each one filled with decrees, requests, and reports written in the script of exhausted clerks. She reads every page. Sometimes she corrects the grammar before deciding a man's fate. She finds it oddly calming, this balance between intellect and authority. Rulers before her wielded swords. She prefers sentences. Words can cut just as deep, but they leave cleaner wounds. She begins her great project, a guide for governing the empire, a collection of principles she calls the nakaz, or instruction. It reads like a manifesto written by a philosopher who happened to have soldiers. She writes that all men should be equal before the law, that torture is unworthy of civilization, that reason should replace superstition. The words look brave on paper, and that's where many of them stay. Russia, after all, is a country where ideals freeze before they reach the ground. Still, she tries. She invites scholars, artists, and architects to her court. New schools open, new libraries fill with books that smell of ink and hope. The nobility pretends to admire these efforts, though most prefer their own kind of enlightenment, one that involves chandeliers, champagne, and not paying taxes. Catherine knows this, and she forgives them strategically. You cannot reform the world in one generation, but you can make it feel slightly embarrassed about itself. The humour of her reign is dry, deliberate, and often unspoken. When an advisor complains about the paperwork generated by her reforms, she replies softly, "Then be thankful we banned torture. You'd have far more to write about." The man laughs uncertainly, unsure if she's joking. That's the trick of her humour. It arrives in the same tone as command. Her nights belong to study. The palace grows quiet except for the sound of pages turning. She reads about natural law, about social contracts, about governments that pretend to be rational. The candlelight trembles across her notes, where she writes in careful French, "To govern is to teach." It's a simple sentence, but in this empire it's revolutionary. Sometimes she dreams of a world that thinks before it punishes, that questions before it fears. But dreams require distance, and distance is a privilege rulers never truly have. Even as she writes, reports arrive from the countryside. Peasants still starving, Nobles still hoarding, priests still warning that reason is an infection spread by foreigners. She reads each letter, signs each decree, and continues to hope that ink might do what swords cannot. The smell of wax fills the room as she seals another stack of orders. The wax is deep red, like cooled blood. Her hand trembles slightly, but only from fatigue. Power, she's learned, is a slow exhaustion disguised as grace. Every act of mercy costs attention. Every act of reform costs allies. Still, she refuses to stop. Her courtiers call her Catherine the Lawgiver, though sometimes they say it with the tone people reserve for storms. When she passes through the great hall, they bow low. Some mean it. Some just calculate the angle. She bows to none. One afternoon, she visits a school she founded herself. The air smells of chalk and damp wood. Children rise from their benches as she enters. Their eyes are wide, their hands ink-stained. She watches them recite verses, trace letters, fumble through arithmetic. It moves her in a way court praise never could. "You are the true future of Russia," she tells them quietly. "Try to be less terrible than your ancestors." The teachers laugh. The children do not. They know sincerity when they hear it. Back at the palace, she returns to the endless machinery of empire. A messenger from the south brings word of unrest. Farmers have risen in protest, shouting her name without understanding it. They want food, not philosophy. She closes her eyes and feels the contradiction tightening around her like a corset. She dreams of logic, but rules a landscape built on hunger. The Enlightenment may have reached Russia, but it arrived wearing boots. At dinner that evening, surrounded by diplomats and flattery, she allows herself one small smile. "We banned torture," she says softly, though paperwork remains. The table laughs, as it's supposed to, but her eyes stay serious. She knows that in her empire, both torture and paperwork share the same purpose: to remind people who decides what matters. Later, she writes again. Her handwriting is slower now, her quill heavier. The ink smells metallic, almost bitter. She notes how reason, once celebrated, becomes inconvenient when it begins asking the wrong questions. "To think," she writes, "is dangerous only to those who prefer darkness." She pauses, then adds, "Unfortunately, darkness is often better organised." She leans back, rubbing her temples. The candle beside her flickers, spilling light across the unfinished pages of the nakaz. Outside, the city sleeps beneath a blanket of mist. The river glints faintly in the moonlight, as if pretending to be peaceful. Catherine closes her eyes for a moment and lets the silence settle over her like fur. When she opens them again, her reflection stares back from the window, sharp, alert, and unamused by its own legend. She whispers to it, "Think beautifully, rule brutally." The glass fogs with her breath, then clears. In this long, candle-lit reflection, the humour was polished and deliberate, the dominant sense sight and warmth. The scent of wax and ink carried the story, each page glowing faintly with intellect and irony. Catherine's mind became her empire's flame, steady, bright, and edged with fatigue. Through reason and paperwork, she built a world that looked enlightened, even when its shadows refused to leave. As we follow the flicker of that light further, the air will thicken again with the smoke of rebellion, and we'll see how mercy, when tested by chaos, must learn to hold a sword. The summer air smells of metal and smoke. In the heart of the empire, banners flutter in a wind that feels more like warning than weather. The year is 1773, and somewhere beyond the Volga River, a man has begun to call himself Peter III, the dead husband Catherine replaced. The peasants believe him. They always believe the wrong ghost. Catherine stands at the window of her study, the light from her candle reflected in the dark glass. Outside, St. Petersburg looks peaceful, a city pretending not to tremble. Inside, letters pile up, reports of rebellion, looted villages, soldiers gone missing, fields burning like dry paper. She reads each one slowly, her face still. She has learned that panic is a language of its own, and rulers cannot afford to speak it. The man leading the revolt calls himself Pugachev. To his followers, he is the resurrected Tsar come to deliver them from tyranny. To Catherine, he is a reminder that reason has limits. A starving man does not debate philosophy. He follows whoever promises bread, even if that promise rides on a lie. She moves toward the map that covers one wall. The empire stretches across it like a sleeping giant, vast and restless. She traces a finger along the southern provinces where the rebellion burns brightest. Each dot represents a town, each line a river, each smudge another life she must decide the value of. The wax drips from her candle, a slow reminder that even light eventually melts under pressure. Her generals wait outside, armour polished, expressions unreadable. When they enter, they bring the smell of cold iron and horse sweat with them. One bows and says, "Your Majesty, the traitors multiply daily. They believe the impostor is blessed by heaven." Catherine looks up from her map and replies, calm as winter, "Then we will show them which heaven listens louder." The orders are written without tremor. Regiments march, villages are retaken, and the rumour of Pugachev's divinity begins to dissolve in smoke. Still, the cost rises. By the time the rebellion ends, thousands are dead. The fields that once grew wheat now grow silence. When they capture Pugachev, he looks nothing like a saviour. Just a man hollowed out by his own legend. Catherine reads the report of his execution over breakfast, takes one slow bite of bread, and moves on to other paperwork. Mercy, she has learned, is a virtue best saved for moments that do not threaten the roof over your head. In the evenings, she writes again to Voltaire, though her letters sound different now. Reason, she tells him, is a fine candle, but the wind of men's ignorance is strong. He replies with admiration and advice from his comfortable estate in France. She smiles as she reads it, thinking that philosophers make fine company, as long as they stay on paper. The empire grows wider. Wars with the Ottomans stretch the map even further south. Crimea becomes Russian under her rule, its shores lined with new ports and restless ambition. She orders new cities to be built, their names stitched into the landscape like signatures. Roads extend through forests that once belonged only to wolves and legends. To the rest of Europe, she becomes Catherine the Great, the woman who made an empire walk on its own 2 feet. To herself, she's still the girl who once memorized Latin verbs by candlelight and learned that endurance can look a lot like grace. The palace reflects her triumph, but not her peace. Courtiers chatter like bright birds, their laughter echoing through gold halls that smell of wax, wine, and calculation. Portraits of her hang everywhere. Catherine as warrior, Catherine as scholar, Catherine as goddess of reason wrapped in silk. She laughs quietly when she passes them. "They paint what they need to believe," she says to an aide, "not what I am." Her private rooms are another world entirely. The fire burns lower here, its warmth a privilege shared only with silence. Letters from the provinces scatter her desk. Petitions, poems, complaints. Among them lies a note from Grigory Potemkin, her trusted general and closest confidant. His handwriting tilts forward, impatient and alive. He writes of victory, of new lands, of cities yet to be built, and always at the end a sentence that feels like something between loyalty and love. She reads it twice, smiles once, and sets it aside. Their connection is both political and personal, a partnership forged in wit and mutual understanding. He's one of the few men who dares to argue with her, and that alone makes him indispensable. When they speak, it is like 2 flames recognizing the same oxygen. Rumour says they married in secret. Catherine neither confirms nor denies it. Some truths grow stronger when left unspoken, but even the brightest alliances flicker. As Potemkin's health declines, so does her certainty. She spends long hours walking the palace gardens, where the air smells of lilacs and distant rain. The fountains whisper endlessly, their rhythm almost like thought. She watches the sunset turn the river to gold and wonders whether power ever truly belongs to anyone, or if it simply borrows its hosts until they burn out. The empire is stronger than ever. New borders, new laws, new museums filled with art rescued from foreign ruins. The Hermitage glows at night, its halls heavy with paintings of saints, battles, and mythological excess. Visitors marvel at it, but Catherine knows the collection best at midnight, when it's empty. She walks among marble faces and oil-painted heavens, listening to the silence of beauty that asks nothing in return. Sometimes she stops before a portrait of herself painted years earlier. The woman in the frame looks invincible. The one standing before it looks tired. She turns away and laughs softly. "They say I conquered half the world," she whispers to no one. "They never ask what it cost to hold it." Outside, a storm rolls across the horizon. The thunder moves like slow applause. Catherine closes the window, not because she fears the rain, but because she's learned to fear the quiet that follows it. She sits by her desk, quill in hand, and begins to write again. The candle burns low, its flame trembling under each gust of wind sneaking through the shutters. "The greatest danger," she writes, "is to believe that power can be gentle." She pauses, lets the ink pool, and adds, "But we must pretend it can, or no one will sleep." She sets the quill down and looks out again at the lightning flickering across the distant clouds. Each flash illuminates the city she built, the empire she shaped, the life she crafted from calculation and courage. The thunder that follows is delayed, like applause arriving from another century. In this storm-lit part of her story, the humour turned dry and rare, like a breath between battles. The dominant sense was sight and heat, candles, lightning, gold, and the reflection of resolve on glass. Catherine's reason met its test, and the flame survived, though darker at the edges. Through rebellion, war, and weary victory, she discovered that even enlightened power must still know when to strike. As we drift further into the quiet after the storm, the candlelight will soften once more, and we'll find her not as the conqueror, but as the woman who refused to disappear. The years move quietly now. The same palace that once buzzed with ambition has grown still, like a stage after the final act. The light through its windows falls more softly, spreading across velvet curtains and fading portraits. The empire outside continues to move. Wars, treaties, new maps drawn with old arrogance. But inside, Catherine's world has narrowed to rooms filled with books, letters, and the rustle of servants who walk more slowly than they used to. Age has made her sharper, not smaller. She works from dawn until the last candle drowns itself in wax. Her quill scratches across paper like a tired violin. Each morning brings a parade of reports, construction, taxes, petitions, the usual reminders that running an empire means reading other people's problems before breakfast. She signs her name with steady precision, never shortening it, as though the act of writing Catherine keeps her alive a little longer. The mirror by her desk reflects a face that has outlived everyone who tried to define it. The powdered wig, the careful jewels, the layers of silk, all armour now. Beneath it, her eyes remain the same, pale, calculating, still alert for weakness in others, still hiding her own. She knows that power never truly grows old. It just learns better disguises. When visitors arrive, they expect grandeur. What they find instead is discipline. She greets them not as a legend, but as a supervisor checking for progress. Her mind moves faster than her courtier's flattery. She speaks of roads, education, inoculation, and history, as if they are her children, the only ones she trusts to grow properly. She rarely mentions her son, the future Emperor Paul. He is everything she isn't, impatient, jealous, convinced that mercy is a form of weakness. Their relationship has become a quiet civil war fought entirely through intermediaries and sighs. In public, she praises him. In private, she plans for contingencies. Love, she once told a confidant, is a privilege. Responsibility is an order. The empire continues to expand, even as her body slows. She reads every new report from the borders. Another fortress completed, another province pacified, another culture absorbed into the Russian winter. The scale of it both thrills and disturbs her. She has built something vast enough to survive her, but she knows it may not survive the people who come after. I did not inherit stability, she writes in one of her letters. I manufactured it, and I doubt they have the tools. Her humour remains, though it has cooled into irony. When courtiers praise her wisdom, she replies, "Experience is just mistakes that learned etiquette." When someone calls her immortal, she answers, "If only that were one of the titles I could enforce." Her laughter is low and brief, like the echo of a door closing somewhere far away. In the evenings, she walks through the halls of the Hermitage. The chandeliers sway gently in the draughts, scattering light across marble and mirrors. Paintings of Greek gods and half-forgotten saints gaze down from gilded frames. She stops before a portrait of herself, painted 20 years earlier. The younger woman in the painting looks amused, untouchable, her hand resting lightly on a globe. Catherine studies her for a long time and finally murmurs, "You were clever. You had no idea how expensive cleverness becomes." She has outlived her lovers, her enemies, and most of her friends. Grigory Potemkin has been gone for years, though his letters remain, stacked in a wooden box tied with a simple blue ribbon. Sometimes she opens it and reads one at random. The paper has yellowed, the ink has faded, but his voice still lingers between the lines, warm, reckless, loyal. When she finishes, she always ties the ribbon again, carefully, as if keeping the past from escaping. At night she dreams of snow, endless, soft, soundless. In her dream, she's walking alone through a forest, her footsteps vanishing behind her before she can look back. It's not frightening, it's peaceful, in the way only solitude can be. She wakes before dawn, her breath misting in the cold air, and tells herself she doesn't believe in omens. Then she lights another candle anyway. Illness comes quietly, like a polite visitor who refuses to leave. Her doctors fuss, offering powders and advice. None of it helps. She waves them away. "I am too busy to be unwell," she says, and keeps working. Her attendants whisper that she's fading. She overhears them and smiles. "If fading means turning to legend," she murmurs, "then so be it." The empire prepares for the inevitable without admitting it. Courtiers bow lower, voices softened, letters arrive with more flattery than information. She sees through all of it. The only person she trusts completely now is herself, and even that trust wavers on bad mornings. One evening, she dictates her last major decree, plans for education reform. Her voice is steady, though her hands shake. Knowledge, she says, is the only inheritance that does not shrink when divided. The secretary nods, pen, scratching, candlelight glinting on the ink like liquid gold. When she finishes, Catherine leans back, closes her eyes, and lets the silence settle around her. Outside, snow begins to fall. It piles gently on the palace roof, softening the world into something almost merciful. She listens to the muffled quiet and feels, for the first time in years, at peace. Not because she believes everything is safe, she knows better, but because she has finally done everything that could be done. The rest, she decides, belongs to time. Her final hours are ordinary. She's found collapsed beside her desk, the ink still wet on her latest notes. Servants rush, doctors arrive, prayers are whispered, and history quietly takes its place beside the bed. The empire will wake tomorrow to headlines, to mourning, to speculation about what comes next. But in this moment, the room holds only the faint smell of wax, parchment, and endings. When they carry her body to lie in state, the candles lining the hall flicker in a cold draught. The flame wavers, then steadies, as if remembering her own discipline, The courtiers weep politely. Outside, the city remains half frozen, half awake. Snow falls across the Neva River, covering the bridges she built, the streets she named, the empire she imagined into being. Years later, people will still argue about her. Was she a tyrant or a visionary, a reformer or a conqueror? The truth, as always, lies somewhere between adjectives. She was human in the most exhausting sense of the word, a woman who refused to disappear, even when the world kept trying to turn her into a myth. And in the quiet corners of the hermitage where her footsteps once echoed, the air still carries a faint warmth, the ghost of candlelight, the scent of ink, and the patience of someone who built an empire not from inheritance, but from will. Here, the humour slowed into melancholy. The dominant sense turned to sight and warmth fading into cold. The flicker of candlelight followed Catherine to the end, steady and deliberate, refusing to go out even when breath did. Through intellect, ambition and endurance, she left a world that could no longer forget her. And far from her palaces, across the ocean of centuries, another queen was already waiting. Her throne built not of marble and gold, but of stone and silence, where the colour red meant not power, but eternity. The jungle breathes differently in the early morning. The air hangs thick, green, and almost liquid. Each leaf drips with yesterday's rain. Each insect hums a note of warning that no one bothers to interpret. Beneath that heavy canopy of vines and heat, a group of archaeologists move slowly, their footsteps swallowed by centuries of silence. Somewhere underfoot, the stones remember a city called Palenque. It is the year 1994. The world above is modern, loud, fast. But here, in the deep south of Mexico, time has chosen to linger. The archaeologists hack gently at the roots that have turned stone into forest and forest into myth. Sweat runs into their eyes. The air smells of earth and old secrets. They are not searching for treasure. They are searching for an answer that no one is certain exists. Deep under a temple, known simply as Temple 13, a narrow staircase descends into darkness. The steps are slick with centuries of humidity. Each one feels like a question. The lead archaeologist lowers a light. Dust floats in the beam, fine, red, and strange. It rises in the air like breath from something still alive. The first voice to speak does not shout. It whispers, "There is another tomb." At the bottom lies a sealed chamber. The limestone door is carved with a faint outline of ancient patterns, spirals, serpents, fragments of a language that once believed eternity could be drawn. When they finally lift the slab, the air that escapes smells metallic, almost sweet. A fine powder spills out, coating gloves, faces, and the beam of every flashlight. Red dust, thick as smoke, soft as ash. They do not know it yet, but they have opened the resting place of a woman who has waited for them for more than 1,000 years. Inside the chamber, everything glows. The walls are the colour of blood and moonlight combined. The stone coffin sits at the centre, surrounded by offerings, shells, pottery, fragments of jade. Even the bones seem tinted red, as though the body once breathed in colour and exhaled it forever. The archaeologists step carefully. One of them kneels, brushes his glove against the floor, and watches the red dust swirl upward. It is cinnabar, a sacred mineral ground from stone rich with mercury. Beautiful, poisonous, and holy. For the Maya, red was more than a colour. It was the pulse between worlds. It marked the rising sun, the birth of day, the renewal of blood, and the passage of souls. To cover the dead in red was to promise them continuation. The idea that endings were just another word for change. The woman in the tomb had been painted with devotion. Each bone, each strand of hair, each ornament had been touched by the same careful hand. Whoever buried her did so not in grief, but in ceremony. The air inside the chamber is heavy, humid, but strangely gentle. Even the insects outside seem to have stopped listening. The team begins their slow, delicate work. Photographs, measurements, the ritual of modern science echoing the ritual of ancient faith. They lift the stone lid inch by inch, their gloves slipping against the wet surface. When the last crack of air escapes, a faint shimmer catches the light. Beneath it lies the outline of a woman wrapped in red. The room feels smaller now. No one speaks. It isn't reverence exactly, it's recognition. Across the centuries, two kinds of devotion have met. One that built pyramids and one that writes reports. Both are, in their own ways, forms of worship. Her skull is adorned with jade. Fragments of a mask still cling to her face, its colour green as river moss. Around her are objects chosen not for luxury but for meaning. A comb carved from bone, a necklace of shells, obsidian blades that glint like frozen night. Each item whispers a sentence from a language without sound. Together they say, she was important, she was cared for, she was expected to return. The archaeologists work carefully, aware that every brushstroke could erase or reveal a lifetime. One of them murmurs, "We don't know her name." Another replies softly, "But we know she mattered." That is enough for now. Outside the temple, the jungle goes on as if nothing happened. Birds call, monkeys argue, the sun presses through the canopy in golden columns. Inside, the light from the flashbulbs fades. What remains is the steady glow of red powder in the beam of a single lamp. It clings to the air, refusing to settle. It feels almost alive. Later, when the discovery is announced to the world, newspapers will call her the Red Queen of Palang. It sounds grand, and maybe it is. But the title feels smaller than the mystery itself. Queens are usually remembered for power, for wars, for monuments. This woman is remembered for stillness, for the patience of stone, for the way her colour refused to fade. In laboratories far away, samples of cinnabar are studied. Scientists explain that mercury preserves bone, that the pigment prevents decay. It is chemistry, they say. But even in science, explanation is only half the story. Beauty always takes the other half. That night, the team seals the chamber again. Not forever, just until the next stage of study. They stand at the top of the stairs, brushing red dust from their gloves, their clothes, their hair. It will cling to them for days, invisible but persistent. It will sink into the folds of notebooks and camera bags, a souvenir from someone who never planned to be found. As they pack up, the sun begins to set beyond the tree line. The jungle turns gold, then orange, then the same deep red as the powder below. It feels for a moment as if the colour has risen to the surface of the world. The wind moves through the trees like a slow breath. Somewhere a bird calls once, twice, then falls silent. If you listen long enough, the jungle begins to sound like the inside of a heartbeat. You can almost imagine it whispering her story, not in words, but in rhythm. She was here. She was buried. She remains. And as the last beam of light disappears, the tomb below glows faintly one last time, as if exhaling. 1,000 years of stillness disturbed only by curiosity, and perhaps by respect. In this quiet descent, the humour became reverence, and the dominant sense turned to colour and breath. The world of green leaves gave way to red dust, and the air itself carried memory. The tone settled between science and prayer, between curiosity and grief. Through the shimmer of cinnabar, we glimpsed how beauty and danger sometimes share the same pigment. As we follow the path deeper into the chamber, the red will grow richer still, wrapping itself around the woman who waited there, preserved by poison and remembered by colour. The air inside the chamber does not move. Even after 1,000 years, it still feels occupied. Not by ghosts exactly, but by something slower. Memory, maybe, or devotion that refuses to leave. The archaeologists stand motionless, as if afraid that breathing too loudly might disturb the balance between reverence and discovery. Every light source, every camera flash seems to bounce off the same colour, that soft, impossible red. It glows on the walls, on the stones, even in the folds of the linen that once wrapped a body now half dust, half legend. The woman lies where she has always lain, on her back, arms folded gently across her chest, surrounded by gifts for a journey she clearly believed would continue elsewhere. The cinnabar powder coats everything, a fine veil of crushed stone and mercury, beautiful and fatal. Even through gloves and masks, the scientists can feel its strange weight. It is not just pigment, it's a statement, a declaration that even death should dress properly. They begin the slow process of uncovering her belongings, brushing away dust so carefully it looks like prayer. First comes the jade mask. It rests on her face like a second expression. Calm, distant, unbothered by time. The green of the stone still shines beneath the red, like forest leaves under sunset light. Each piece fits together precisely, as if someone shaped the afterlife to measure. The eyes are hollow, but they look unafraid. In the soft light, it's easy to imagine that beneath the mask she is simply asleep. Next, they find bone pins, still smooth after centuries, lying near where her hair would have been. Obsidian blades are arranged nearby, dark and perfect. They catch the light in sharp reflections like tiny black mirrors. No bloodstains remain, only intention. Each tool belonged to ceremony, not violence. They were used to cut ties with the world, to prepare a soul for travel. The Maya believed death required precision, a ritual choreography to help the body remember what the spirit might forget. In the corner of the tomb sits a small bowl of shells and fragments of jade beads, offerings of water and eternity. To leave nothing was to abandon someone twice. To leave everything was to ensure they stayed loved. The air smells faintly metallic, the echo of mercury, and something else too. Earth, lime, the sweetness of long decayed resin. It's a scent that defies time, half warning, half perfume. You can almost feel it settling into your lungs, reminding you that beauty has always had a price. A researcher takes a small sample of the red dust, sealing it in glass. Under the light it glitters faintly. You can see why ancient priests thought it sacred, crushed stone with the shimmer of sunrise. To the Maya, red was not simply the colour of blood, it was the colour of dawn, of birth, of the east where the sun is reborn each morning. It meant renewal, continuity, the idea that death is less of an ending and more of a doorway. Looking at her now, wrapped in colour that refused to fade, you can almost believe it. The powder has preserved her bones perfectly, not through magic but through Mercury's strange chemistry. Still, the result feels mystical. She was, as one archaeologist would later say, preserved by poison, remembered by colour. It's the kind of line that sounds poetic until you realise it's true. Outside the tomb, the jungle keeps breathing, humid, steady, oblivious. But down here, the air feels thin, as if the room itself is holding its breath. The flicker of flashlight beams dances across the mask. Each movement looks like pulse and reflection, life and echo. The scientists whisper measurements, but the chamber ignores them. Silence has been here longer, and it intends to stay. They photograph everything. The placement of every bone, the angle of every offering, the gentle curve of her neck beneath the layers of powder. Each image is an act of translation, trying to turn reverence into data. But reverence doesn't fit well in reports. It escapes into the light, into the way people's hands shake when they touch something that has outlasted belief. Later, when the chamber is sealed again for preservation, the scent of cinnabar lingers in the air above ground. It clings to skin, to tools, to memory. Back at camp, the team eats in silence. No one mentions the red dust under their nails, though each of them keeps glancing at their hands as if expecting it to glow. That night, rain begins to fall, a thick tropical downpour that turns paths into rivers. Water seeps through the jungle floor, down into the cracks of ancient stone, into the same chamber they had opened. The cinnabar stirs slightly in the runoff, creating faint red streaks on the steps. Under the flicker of lightning, the temple looks as though it's bleeding light. For centuries, people have buried their dead in hopes of outsmarting time. But here, time and devotion seem to have signed a truce. The Red Queen of Palanque did not escape death. She simply made it beautiful. In the following months, her remains are studied carefully. Tests are run, numbers are written. The scientists speak in gentle tones, as if afraid their conclusions might sound like disrespect. They find traces of age, mid-40s perhaps, maybe older. No sign of trauma, no sign of haste. Her burial was slow, deliberate, and done by people who loved her enough to turn farewell into ceremony. Catherine the Great ruled with intellect. The Red Queen ruled with stillness. Her power came not from armies or decrees, but from the precision of those who prepared her passage. It's a different kind of empire, one built not of conquest, but of care. As the researchers leave the site for the last time, the forest begins reclaiming what was disturbed. Vines reach towards stone, moss thickens along the temple walls, the wind moves softly through the leaves, scattering red dust into the air. In the golden light of late afternoon it glows like incense, like breath, like a secret exhaled at last. In this session, humour returned in whispers, the dominant sense turned to touch and colour, the weight of powder, the gleam of jade, the sharpness of obsidian. The tone stayed reverent, each detail part ceremony, part revelation. Death was no longer loss but arrangement, a kind of art that transforms decay into design. As we follow the light further into the stillness, the story will open gently into the question of identity, who she was, who she became, and why, even unnamed, she still glows. When the archaeologist returned months later, the air above the temple had changed. The vines had grown thicker, swallowing the stone stairs until they looked more like part of the forest than a path. The humidity pressed harder against the skin, as if the jungle wanted to reclaim everything it had given up. Inside the chamber, the red dust still glowed faintly, though no one could explain why. Some said it was the way light filtered through the cracks above. Others said that colour, once it soaked into history, refused to leave. The scientists came back with new tools, new gloves, and the same question: who was she? They had called her the Red Queen, but that was just an invention of awe. The tomb had given no name, no inscription, no boast of lineage, just care, the kind that says more than any title. Her bones were moved carefully to a laboratory, wrapped in white cloth like a second burial. Tests were performed, samples taken, numbers whispered. The air there smelled not of earth, but of disinfectant, a different kind of devotion. Machines hummed softly, measuring what the past no longer remembered. They searched for DNA, for the faint code of identity that hides inside every cell. And yet, when the results came back, they found little more than silence. Time had dissolved what science hoped to translate. The Red Queen remained uncooperative, as if even her bones refused to explain themselves. Some believed she was Zakbu Ajao, the wife of Pakal the Great, the most famous ruler of Palanque, whose own tomb lies nearby beneath the Temple of the Inscriptions. Her burial was nearly as elaborate, her ornaments nearly as royal. The proximity suggested closeness, a pairing beyond coincidence. Others argued she was a high priestess, chosen not by marriage but by ritual, her power more spiritual than political. And still others thought she might be someone else entirely. A woman of status, yes, but one whose story had been erased and rewritten by the quiet persistence of stone. The debate continues even now, echoing through conference halls and museum exhibits. But in truth, her identity may never have been meant for rediscovery. The Maya often viewed names as temporary, but actions as eternal. She was buried with honour, not for who she was, but for what she represented. A bridge between the sun and the moon, between the mortal and the divine. In Maya cosmology, everything exists in pairs. The sky and the earth, the day and the night, the breath and the stillness. Each needs the other to complete its rhythm. Pakal, the great king, ruled as the sun, bright, public, enduring. The woman buried beside him may have been his moon, quieter, gentler, reflecting power rather than projecting it. In the carvings of Palanque, the moon is always female. It is the keeper of cycles, of fertility, of time's slow circles. It governs what grows in the dark, what moves unseen. In that sense, even if her name is gone, her role survives. She is the counterbalance, the hidden pulse that keeps the empire's rhythm steady. In every culture, the moon outlasts the king. Under a microscope, fragments of jade from her necklace shimmer like pieces of captured ocean. Scientists discuss composition and trade routes, tracing how far these stones must have travelled. From riverbeds hundreds of miles away, carved by hands that would never see where their work would end up. Every bead is a small act of devotion, a story in mineral form. The Red Queen's ornaments were not simply decorative, they were instructions for eternity. Green was the colour of life and renewal. To wear it into death was to dress in the promise of returning. Her mask is studied next, each piece of jade shaped to fit her face, every edge filed smooth. When reassembled, it reveals a calm expression, not smiling, not sorrowful, just serene. It is the face of someone who knew her story wouldn't need words. When displayed later in a museum, visitors stand before it in silence, as if speech might undo the illusion. Children press their hands to the glass, leaving fog that briefly clouds her calm. Adults lower their voices without realizing why. Something in her gaze commands quiet. For centuries, the jungle protected her. It grew thick enough to hide her from invaders, earthquakes, and time itself. And when the world finally found her, it could only guess at the story she left behind. But maybe that is the point. Maybe the Red Queen never wanted to be remembered for what she was called, but for how she was kept, surrounded by colour, honoured by silence, treated as both human and celestial. At night, when the visitors are gone and the museum lights dim, her display glows faintly under the soft lamps. The green of her mask seems to shift to silver. The red pigment in the photographs beside her turns darker, deeper, almost breathing. The guards who walk by swear that the air smells faintly of earth and rain. They joke about ghosts, but quietly. Some things, even in the age of electricity, still feel sacred. In the wider world, her story becomes part of something larger, a reminder that death, when seen from far enough away, is less of an ending and more of a reorganization of matter. The cinnabar that once coated her bones was drawn from mountains, the jade that covered her eyes came from riverbeds. The air that once filled her lungs now moves through jungles and cities alike. She's not gone, she has merely changed address. When you think about it, every civilization is a version of the same conversation. How to make time remember us. Some build empires of stone, others empires of words. The Maya built both. Their cities were stories carved in limestone, their rituals poems performed with colour and smoke. And even now, when the language is mostly gone, and the temples are half swallowed by forest, their voices still rise through the dust. They speak in colour, in architecture, in echoes that sound suspiciously like heartbeat. If you listen carefully, the Red Queen's chamber hums with that same rhythm. Not loudly, just enough to remind you that death is never completely quiet. One of the archaeologists once said, "Even unnamed she glows." He meant it metaphorically, but he was also right. The cinnabar still catches the light, turning the silence of her tomb into a slow-burning sunrise. The red never fades, the dust still shimmers, and if you tilt your head just so, it almost looks like she's breathing. In this closing of her chapter, humour dissolved into awe, and the dominant sense became light and reflection. Red dust, green jade, silver moon. The tone drifted toward reverence, each sentence carrying both weight and gentleness. Death revealed itself not as vanishing but as rearrangement, an alchemy of matter and memory. As we drift forward, the jungle's red fades into paint, the mask into a canvas, and the echo of one queen's endurance becomes the heartbeat of another, a woman who turned pain into colour, and colour into immortality. Far from the jungles of Palanque, where stone and silence preserved a queen, another woman's immortality began with a sound loud enough to shatter bone and prophecy. It was September of 1925 in Mexico City, a city alive with horns, laughter and revolution dust still settling in the streets. A bus and a streetcar collided that afternoon. Metal met metal, glass screamed, and in the middle of it all, a young woman named Frida Kahlo found herself between movement and stillness, one trying to end the other. When the wreck was over, time seemed to pause out of respect. Passengers crawled from the wreckage, coughing, bleeding, dazed. Frida was pinned beneath an iron handrail that had pierced through her hip and out her pelvis. Another passenger, in a kind of panic, dropped a bag of gold powder from an art school project. The dust spilled across her bleeding body, covering her in glitter and sunlight. Her body shattered, one witness said later, and her spirit glittered in gold dust. An ambulance carried her away through streets lined with vendors and stray dogs. The city did what cities do best. It kept going. Life moved around the stillness, and she became the quiet centre of it. Surgeons worked through the night. Metal replaced bone, stitches replaced skin, and the rhythm of her pulse returned reluctantly. She was 18. The doctors told her she might never walk again. They said it softly, as if speaking to someone too fragile for truth. Frida, hearing this, decided she would not only walk, she would run toward the impossible. Recovery turned her bedroom into a world. The bed became both prison and studio, the ceiling her sky. Her father, a photographer with the patience of storms, built her a special easel that let her paint while lying flat. Her mother hung a mirror above the bed so that when she couldn't move, she could still see. It was a cruel gift, constant reflection, constant reminder, but Frida found a way to turn it into rebellion. At first, she painted small things, flowers, leaves, quiet objects that didn't need permission. Then she began painting herself. Not vanity, necessity. When your body betrays you, the only territory left to claim is your own face. The mirror became both enemy and ally. She stared into it for hours, tracing pain with brush and pigment. Each portrait was not how she looked, but how she felt. In those long hours between morphine and memory, she discovered something doctors never could. That art is another kind of anatomy, one where scars become structure. Her paintings looked nothing like the polite realism of her time. They were retablos, small devotional panels used by Mexican families to thank saints for surviving misfortune. Except Frida's saints were herself. She painted her broken spine as a cracked column, her corsets as cages, her blood as flowers. Pain became composition, colour became confession. Critics later called it surrealism. She laughed and said, "I never painted dreams, I painted my reality." Outside her window, Mexico was rebuilding itself. Murals rising on government walls, painted by men who believed art could teach justice. One of them was Diego Rivera, older, enormous, already famous. He painted the working class as gods of labour, his frescoes full of power and dust. When he met Frida, he saw something equally monumental but turned inward, a revolution painted on skin instead of stone. They married in 1929, a ceremony described by friends as an elephant and a dove. The elephant, of course, was Diego. The dove came with thorns. Their marriage was a weather system, thunderous, creative, impossible to predict. They loved loudly, betrayed constantly, reconciled frequently, and painted through it all. Frida called him her second accident and somehow meant it fondly. They travelled to America, where polite society found her strange and magnetic. A woman in Tijuana dresses, her eyebrows defiant, her laugh the sound of tequila being poured. She painted everywhere she went, filling canvases with self-portraits, still lifes and symbols of a country she never stopped missing. The accident had left her body fragile, but her will worked like a volcano. She endured more than 30 surgeries, each one promising repair and delivering more scars. Doctors prescribed rest. She prescribed colour. When she could not stand, she painted lying down. When she could not sit, she painted from bed. When she could not lift a brush, she had assistants hold the palette for her. She healed with pigment when medicine failed. Visitors to her home, the famous Casa Azul, the Blue House, remember it as half hospital, half garden. The walls were cobalt, the air full of parrots and laughter. Every object looked touched by thought. The bedposts carved with ribbons, the mirrors framed in flowers. Even her crutches were painted because if she had to suffer, it would at least be beautiful. In that house, she turned agony into architecture. Every brushstroke became proof that endurance can be art. "Feet," she once wrote in her diary, "what do I need you for when I have wings to fly?" It sounds like poetry, but it was really stubbornness disguised as grace. Her paintings began to draw attention, small exhibitions, critical praise, whispers that she was not just Diego's wife, but a force of her own. Her work was intimate and unflinching. People looked because they could not look away. She had painted pain until it became universal, and in doing so, she gave permission for others to name their own. Through it all, humour survived, a kind not born of denial, but of clarity. When visitors asked how she endured constant illness, she said, "I drink to drown my sorrows, but the damned things have learned to swim." She laughed as she said it, though her laughter always sounded slightly tired. The kind that understands the joke is never the cure, only the break between storms. By the late 1940s, her health worsened. Her spine was fragile as porcelain, her leg infected beyond saving. Yet she continued to paint, her last canvases bursting with fruit and sunlight, each stroke louder than her pain. She painted as others breathe, not because she wanted to, but because she would stop existing if she didn't. Sometimes, in the afternoon, she would lie back and look at the mirror above her bed, the same one that had watched her for decades. In its reflection, she saw not the girl from the bus, but the woman she had created, equal parts suffering and colour, tragedy and laughter. The mirror never blinked, and neither did she. In this chapter, the tone turned intimate and defiant, the humour raw and radiant. The dominant sense was colour. The red of blood turned to roses, the blue of walls turned to sanctuary, the gold dust that turned pain into light. Frida Kahlo painted not to escape her suffering, but to organise it, to make it less random. Through her, the theme of death and transformation changed shape again. It became endurance. And as we follow her toward her final canvas, the story will soften into gratitude, the calm recognition that even agony can leave behind something warm, alive, and worth looking at forever. Morning in the Blue House begins with colour before it begins with light. Even in pain, Frida insists on it. The walls burn cobalt blue, The kitchen tiles glow with yellow suns and green vines, and the smell of paint and fruit lingers like an old hymn. The parrots chatter, the monkey complains, and the light that slips through the courtyard seems almost too soft for someone who has lived so loudly. Frida lies in her bed, her body a map of scars and stubbornness. Her right leg is gone, her spine bound in steel and cloth, but her hands still move. Brush, pigment, canvas. On the bedside table, a small vase of lilies, a bottle of morphine, and a mirror. Beside the bed, Diego Rivera leans over, trying to look calm. His face, once the centre of every argument and every painting, now looks smaller in the blue light. He tells her to rest. She tells him to stop giving bad advice. Their love has always sounded like thunder under sunlight, violent, luminous, impossible to ignore. They have divorced, remarried, betrayed, forgiven, and shared everything except boredom. When asked why she stayed with him, she said, "Because we are the same thing, volcano and ash, each pretending to be surprised by the other." Diego laughs when he hears it, though it's half grief by now. It is the year 1953. The doctors have forbidden Frida to leave her bed. But Mexico City is hosting her first solo exhibition, the first time her work will fill a room without Diego's name beside it. She tells everyone she will go. The doctors say it's impossible. "Impossible?" she says, smiling. "Then I suppose it's time." The gallery opens that evening, candles lit, music drifting through the doors. Guests arrive expecting absence and find a miracle instead. An ambulance parks outside. The crowd hushes as attendants carry Frida inside, bed and all. She waves like a queen in a coronation painted by defiance itself. The bed is rolled between the canvases, portraits of herself, of pain, of laughter so raw it looks like confession. She raises a glass of tequila and says, "I am not sick. I am broken. But I am happy to be alive as long as I can paint." The room erupts in applause, the kind that feels more like prayer. That night becomes legend. Photographers capture her smiling through pain, wrapped in red shawls, surrounded by colour. In every image, the same contradiction, fragility and ferocity sharing the same skin. It's the kind of scene that history remembers as triumph, though it was built on exhaustion. But for Frida, art was never about comfort. It was about insisting that the wound and the masterpiece could coexist. The months that follow are short, bright and full of farewells disguised as conversations. She paints until her hands tremble too much to hold a brush. Her last work is a still life. Watermelons sliced open, their red flesh gleaming under sunlight. Across the bottom, she writes 3 words in small deliberate script. "Viva la vida." Long live life. It sounds like optimism, but it feels more like a sigh. Outside, the summer heat presses against the walls. The courtyard smells of wet earth and sugar from overripe fruit. The sounds of Mexico, laughter, traffic, church bells, drift faintly through the open window. She listens to them the way one listens to music through a dream. The nurses move quietly around her, rearranging pillows, adjusting bandages. Every movement is a reminder of the distance between her spirit and her body. But she never lets that distance win. Visitors come often now. Artists, friends, admirers and strangers. Each one brings flowers, gossip, or the same impossible question. "How do you keep creating when it hurts so much?" Frida smiles. "It's simple," she says. "You either make art or you become it." They laugh, uncertain whether it's a joke. It isn't. Diego spends more time by her side. He paints less, eats little, and speaks rarely. The house, once filled with arguments and music, grows quiet except for the scratch of her brush. At night, when sleep refuses to come, she talks about everything. The revolution, her students, the colour green, which she says is the best smell in the world. She talks about death too, but without fear. "It's not the end," she says. "It's just a change of wardrobe." One evening, a storm rolls across the city. Lightning flashes over the rooftops. Thunder rattles the glass. Frida asks for her sketchbook. Her hands shake as she draws small fruits, faces, bones, fragments of life refusing to dissolve. When she tires, she closes the book and whispers to Diego, "You'll see me everywhere." It sounds dramatic, but she means it literally. She's painted herself into every surface she touched. She's made sure she will be impossible to erase. A few days later, she dies in the Blue House, quietly, as if she's finally decided to rest after 50 years of fighting gravity. The sky outside is perfectly clear. People say the parrot screamed at the exact moment her breath stopped, but perhaps that's just what stories do when they need witnesses. The funeral takes place at the Palace of Fine Arts. Her coffin is draped in the Mexican flag. Thousands come to say goodbye. Diego stands near the front, his eyes unreadable. When the time comes, someone opens the coffin for one last viewing. The crowd gasps. Frida is dressed in a bright red shawl, her face serene, her lips faintly smiling. In death, she looks exactly as she lived, composed, defiant, and somehow still in charge. When the body is cremated, the flames flare gold, then red, then green, her palette returning to light. Diego later writes, "I didn't know I could love so much and lose so much in the same heartbeat." The house, the art, the laughter remain, though they sound different now, like echoes wearing her perfume. In the years that follow, the world finally catches up to her. Her art travels across continents, her face becomes a symbol of endurance, her story a quiet anthem for anyone who has ever hurt beautifully. She becomes more than a painter. She becomes a verb. To Frida is to survive with colour. Back in the Blue House, now a museum, her bed still stands beneath the mirror. The easel waits beside it, a dried brush still resting where she left it. On the wall hangs a small sign she painted herself, "Viva la vida." Visitors stop and read it in silence. Some smile, some cry. The parrots in the courtyard still make too much noise, and the light still turns the walls to fire at noon. If you listen carefully, you can almost hear her laugh, that dry, amused sound that always came before something important. You can almost see the gold dust rising again, the same that once covered her broken body, now scattered through every colour she ever touched, from the mud huts of medieval Europe to the marble halls of Russia, to the stone temples of Palenque, and finally to this small house painted blue. One thread runs through them all, the human need to turn pain into memory, and memory into beauty. Dirt becomes life. Red dust becomes worship. Broken bones become art. Every age, in its own quiet desperation, has found a way to hurt beautifully. And that is how the story ends, not with silence, but with gratitude. The humour of history softened into warmth. The dominant sense became colour and light, and every voice we've met, the peasant, the empress, the queen, the painter, joined in the same quiet conclusion, that endurance, in all its forms, is art. If you're still awake, congratulations. You've survived centuries. If you're asleep, that's fine too. Even dreams, after all, are just another way of remembering.